Welcome to video 8 of the Stone Women presentation. This is video 8 of 12. In the last video, video 7, we talked about how the tribes of Israel separated from the tribe of Judah that was in Jerusalem. And ultimately what happened is all the tribes got carried away and their cities either partially or fully destroyed, except there was one family of which Isaiah prophesied about, a remnant that would escape out of Jerusalem and be taken to a place where they would take root downward and bear fruit upwards, meaning they would establish themselves in that location where they're taken and they would prosper, bear fruit upward. Lots of good fruits would come of it. And that family, as we talked about, as Isaiah prophesied, is a seed of Jacob that escapes out of the Judah-Jerusalem location, and that's exactly what the Book of Mormon is talking about. Around the year 600 BC, when King Zedekiah was king of Jerusalem and King Nebuchadnezzar was coming to conquer Jerusalem and carry those people away captive, God went to a man named Lehi and said, "Hey Lehi, time for you to escape. I'm going to take you to a special spot, a promised land, a covenant location." So Lehi takes his family and they start to head to that location. One of his children, we learn about his children. One of the main ones we learn about is Nephi, and Nephi is actually the one telling the story. By the time they get to the promised land, shortly after that, Lehi dies, and so it's kind of Nephi that is really the one who sets up and prospers in the promised land, the covenant location. And where he's taking this remnant that escapes from Jerusalem is to the Jacob-Joseph location, the covenant location, the Abraham location, where Jacob dropped his pillar, the house of God, the gate of heaven location, Mississippi Valley, Israel Valley. That's where he's taking them because they were the seed of Joseph. And we talked about in the last video that they had to go acquire the plates of brass, and a huge reason for that was because it contained the genealogy of the seed of Joseph. And we're going to learn more about what's on those plates in this video, specifically some things that Joseph of Egypt said and prophesied that would happen in the future. But they went back and they got those plates of brass. Lehi studies the plates of brass and he goes, "Oh, we're the seed of Joseph. We're the seed of Jacob. God's chosen us to continue the covenant, and he's taking us back to the location that was promised to Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph." And so that's what they are. That's where they're headed. And Lehi bursts into prophecy and prophesies about the future of his seed and how that's all going to play out. And just to clear up any confusion that there might be, he names the two children that were born, that his wife birthed on the way to the promised land. He named those two children Jacob and Joseph because he knew, and he named them that so that we know that they were the continuation of that covenant, the Jacob covenant, the Israel covenant, the Joseph of Egypt covenant, and how God has always said and always done it. The pattern is take the seed of Joseph, the seed of Israel, the seed of Abraham, back to the location, give them a shot. They do evil, take them away, bring another seed back. They do evil, kick them out, bring another seed back, and that's been the pattern. And so that's what the Book of Mormon is, and we're going to dive into a lot more of what the Book of Mormon has to say. Specifically, we're going to talk about what they built and how they built it, and we're going to finally cover how they moved all the weight. We're actually going to lay all that out towards the end of this video. First, we're going to go through all the different stuff that they built. So just a reminder, because I know it can be tough to keep up with all the names and stuff, and look, on that note, man, I've tried to just kind of boil stuff down and simplify, but there is no way to get around some of the stuff that is difficult to follow. And that's, I think it's kind of set up that way. So you have to spend time in the Word, in the Book of Law, studying these things out. And, I would definitely recommend studying it out for yourself, because even me, there's danger. There can be issues in just only hearing what other people have to say about the Book of Law and the Word. The best thing to do is you get in there, you read it. Don't use other manuals. Don't even read the footnotes and the chapter headings. Just read what the text says, say some prayers, ask God for help, and you be the one to dive in there and figure out what these things are, what these books, what these scriptures are actually saying. Just to say that the family that God chose to escape, the remnant to escape out of Jerusalem and take that family to the promised land, the father of that family's name is Lehi. And then he has children whose names are Nephi, Laman, and Lemuel. And then we also learned about the other two, Jacob and Joseph, that were born. There's another one named Sam. I'm just not really including him in the discussion, but he's also involved. But really what happens now and what we're going to see right here, I got this little title page that says Nephites and Lamanites in the United States of America. Because what happens is Lehi dies, the father of the family, not long after they get to the promised land. And it's really Nephi and his children, and then Laman and Lemuel and their children that become like the main focus of everything that we learn about. The Nephites being the children of Nephi, and then the Lamanites being the children of Laman and Lemuel, some of the brothers of Nephi. And we'll learn a lot more about them right here in just a second. And what we're going to see here and what I'm going to lay out here is that it's the Nephites that are the ones who built the majority of the heavy stone architecture that we see all across the country. And we're going to talk about how they moved the weight to be able to construct everything. And we'll see that as we read about all the materials that they use to build all their stuff, it's an exact match for all of this stone architecture that we see all across the country. So in summary, God escaped a remnant out of Jerusalem. That's the seed of Jacob and Joseph, and that's Lehi and his children, Nephi and Laman and Lemuel and Jacob and Joseph. And they are the seed of Joseph, going back to the covenant location that God covenanted to Joseph of Egypt, and Jacob, whose name is Israel, and Abraham, whose name was Abram. And I mentioned a little bit in the last video that Laman and Lemuel were complainers. They didn't really like what was going on. They went along with it, but they were just kind of mad and complaining the whole time. And that just escalated to the point where they got really mad and wanted to kill Nephi, their brother. And they'd like tried several times, but eventually there came a point where God goes, they're actually like really gonna kill you this time, so time to separate. So right here in 2 Nephi 5:1, we read a little bit about that. It says, Nephi prayed unto God, cried unto God because of the anger of his brethren, Laman and Lemuel. Jacob and Joseph were good guys, but Laman and Lemuel just not very good guys. And their anger did increase against me, insomuch that they did seek to take away my life. The Lord did warn me that I, Nephi, should depart from them and flee into the wilderness, and all those who would go with me. So there's a separation that happens pretty quickly once they arrive to the promised land, where Laman and Lemuel are really going to kill Nephi now, and God goes, okay, Nephi, time to separate. And so now there's two civilizations. It's the same family, but they're separating into kind of two civilizations right here, and they're against each other. It's not really that and the Laman and Lemuel, like that group is called the Lamanites, and the Nephite group, the group of Nephi and his followers, is called the Nephites. And so what you have here is the Lamanites, who are super against the Nephites. The Nephites aren't like necessarily super against the Lamanites, but like if the Lamanites are trying to kill them and stuff, then obviously you gotta handle that, you know, in whichever ways that needs to be handled. But they become pitted against each other, so to speak, and they're not on the same page anymore. And you can look at the Nephites as the good people, the people who are trying to follow God, and the Lamanites as the people who have already, like in a short period of time after they get to the promised land, they're already abandoning God and everything like that. And so in 2 Nephi 5:7-8, it says that the Nephites separated from the Lamanites. They traveled for a little bit. They eventually get to a spot where they start to settle. And it says in 2 Nephi 5:11, the Lord was with us, talking about the Nephi and the Nephites, everyone that followed Nephi, and we did prosper exceedingly, for we did sow seed. So we see once again that the righteous are sowing seed. He's being a sower, he's being a husbandman. They're starting to plant crops and raise livestock. And it says that they prospered exceedingly because they had started to do this thing, and they did reap again in abundance. And we began to raise flocks and herds and animals of every kind. So just like we go back into the Old Testament and we see Noah says began to be a husbandman and he planted a vineyard, and then we see the same thing with Jacob and Abraham, where they are husbandmen, they are sowers. Husbandman and sower meaning the same thing. You're practicing agriculture and raising livestock. So husbandman, a person who cultivates the land, a farmer. That's another good word you could use, is like they're farming now. Sow means to plant seed by scattering it in or on the earth. So right here it's saying, you know, just like we saw in the Old Testament, that Nephi starts to sow the land, just like Adam was told to do in the very beginning. Like that's very much part of this ancient covenant, is a certain seed of man in a certain location, and they're supposed to sow the land, be husbandmen, practice husbandry, farming, agriculture, all that. So just to remind us that husbandman and a sower are the same thing, referring to agriculture, working the land. And so the ancient covenant, as part of the ancient covenant, it's being a husbandman, a sower, a mason, a priest, and there's a covenant promise location. Okay, now if we look at the top of the Nebraska Capitol building, I pointed this out earlier, but we'll just cover it again, where this copper guy up here, huge copper man, has a bag of seeds and he's tossing it into the earth. This is the sower. And obviously you see the Egyptian eagle right here and the pyramid triangles, lots of old ancient architecture right there. And what I'm gonna walk us through is, now that the Nephites are settled, they're gonna start to build. And we're gonna see the materials they use and what they build, and that's the leftover stone architecture that we have in our country now. So 2 Nephi 5:15. And I'm gonna go through a lot of these verses, so it's very, very, very obvious that, okay, these are not poor dirt people. These are very rich, advanced design, advanced architecture type of civilizations right here. So I did teach my people to build buildings and to work in all manner of wood, iron, copper, brass, steel, gold, silver, and precious ores, which were in great abundance. These are very difficult materials to pull out of the earth, to turn into materials to use to build with, and then actually building and constructing with them. You have to be, and they're all very heavy, you have to be advanced. You have to have machinery and all that. And we're going to read that they absolutely had all of that. These aren't poor dirt people with wood carts and pickaxes. It's advanced people. So right here again, we see Nephi and his civilization, all of his followers, and they grow into a very, very big civilization, very populous. And we see them being masons, practicing masonry, just like we've seen all these other righteous men before in the location. Abraham, Jacob, doesn't matter who, they're building, they're being masons, they're being husbandmen, sowers, farmers, and also masons. So this right here is looking straight up at the top, the bottom, I guess, of the Nebraska Capitol dome right here. So this big dome right here, we're looking straight up at it right here. And I'll zoom in and you'll see just very, very intricate, fine, masterful architecture right here. And it's all stone, like look at all this stone and lots of gold. Very, very masterful. This is, I've showed you this one already, another look inside Nebraska Capitol building. And I also explained in the last video that the descendants of these Nephites and Lamanites is what we know as the Native American Indians. But the Native American Indians aren't actually the name Native American Indians. What they actually are is this seed of Jacob that escaped out of Jerusalem and went to the promised land, the promised location, the Jacob's pillar location, the Mississippi Valley, Israel Valley. That's who we started calling Native Americans. But Native Americans is just a new name that we gave them. Who they actually are is Nephites and Lamanites, who are the seed of Joseph, seed of Jacob that escaped out of Jerusalem and came here to the promised land, the place we now call the United States of America. And so that's who is depicted right here on these huge doors inside of the Nebraska state capitol with the Egyptian eagle. Remember the beginning of the Book of Mormon, covered this in the last video, in the language of the Egyptians. So these are very much Egyptian style people, also Jewish style people coming straight out of Jerusalem, King Solomon's temple, all that still with heavy Egyptian influence. So there's, I wouldn't even call it Egyptian influence. This is just like part Egyptian is who they are. And so when they come over here and start building everything, if there's any leftovers from them, a lot of it would look exactly like Egyptian and Jewish Jerusalem, those time periods type of architecture. But again, we're not doing the whole Middle East thing and all that story about over there. So you can't, like, don't try and apply it, what happens over there and all those stories to this. Just take the stories straight from the text, from the book of law, where it's talking about this stuff, and start to look at it through that lens. And it all makes so much more sense when you do that. So this is the exterior of the Nebraska Capitol right now. And this is one where I do think this is straight up like Nephi built this. Nephi and his people built what we now call the Nebraska Capitol building. And that's why there's all this Old Testament stonework depicted everywhere inside and outside this building, because they escaped Jerusalem in around 600 BC, and not too long after that, they arrived to the Promised Land and they start building. So in between 600 and 500 BC, like they're already in these spots starting to build stuff. And so that's very much still Old Testament time period. It's still like animal sacrifice, build altars to sacrifice on time period. And so that's why we see all this stuff depicted right here in super old heavy stone, is because the people that built it, the Nephites, that's how they were living, and they were living the law of Moses. And so we see animal sacrifice right here, like I talked to you about before. See the ram right here. You got Adam and Eve. Adam always robed, Adam with the sword of truth, Eve with her arm raised to the square. Over here we see other people depicted in robes, and just huge stone towers, and at the very top of it, the eagle that escaped God, that God escaped the Israelites out of Egypt on eagle's wings, and the sower on top of the dome. All just 100% Old Testament architecture. And when you read the Book of Mormon, Nephi several times is talking about, like, don't you remember we were escaped out of Egypt on eagle's wings? Don't you remember God did that to our forefathers? So very much like Nephi leading the Nephites was very much practicing the law of Moses, keeping the law of Moses, and would build something exactly like this. And I would say he did build this. 2 Nephi 5:16 says, I, Nephi, did build a temple, and I did construct it after the manner of the temple of Solomon. He just left Jerusalem, and he's trying to keep the law of Moses, and he lived there. Like, that's where he was born and raised, was in this King Solomon city place. And so he knew that temple. And so now he's over in the Promised Land, the Missouri location, Mississippi Valley area, and it says he built a temple after the manner of the temple of Solomon, save it were not built of so many precious things, for they were not to be found upon the land. Wherefore it could not be built like unto Solomon's temple, but the manner of the construction was like unto the temple of Solomon, and the workmanship thereof was exceedingly fine. So they're saying it's constructed in the same manner. They just didn't have as much of the precious stuff as Solomon did when he built his temple. But they're building a temple, and if it's similar in construction to Solomon's temple, absolute masterful masonry occurring right here. Super heavy, advanced works of architecture. And all that comes with that, all the machinery and everything else that's needed for that. And so just another look here, little backed out look at the Nebraska Capitol, just a massive piece of super heavy stone architecture. And I showed this earlier, but an interesting article that I found right here, it's the nebraskavirtualcapital.org, and it starts talking about this building in some interesting ways. One is that if you draw some lines from the base up to the top of the tower, it forms a pyramid shape. Really interesting. But then also when you read about the memorial chamber, as they call it, at the top on the 14th floor, it says it was designed to look like a temple. Why would the architects want it to look like a temple? Oh, yeah, why would they want to do that? Because the architect was Nephi, and he built a temple similar to Solomon's temple, and that's where he came from. So he was very much knew how to build. He was a mason. And also, like, part of the story of how they got to the Promised Land is he had to build a boat for them to travel on, and God gave him patterns and designs for how to build that boat. So this is just another man, another mason, like David got patterns straight from God of how to build stuff. Same thing happened with Nephi. And so, oh, why is stuff looking like a temple? Like, let's connect some dots here and go, someone's lying about this stuff. And when you read these books of law, these scriptures, it's like, yeah, here's actually what's going on. And then you've also got King Solomon depicted. I showed you him on the exterior of the temple, the Nebraska Capitol. And it says, King Solomon built many temples during his time as a leader. These temples were the center for Hebrew religious activities, just as the state capitol is the center of our state's governmental activities. Yeah, let's just compare ancient Old Testament temples to our Capitol buildings. Same thing, right? Well, yeah, actually, because the ancient conspiracy has just snagged all this old architecture and said, here's how we're going to use it. But a lot of that old architecture is Nephi building stuff and King Solomon building stuff and these ancient masons that were masterful building stuff that still exists in the land nowadays. we're even occupying some of it and using some of it, but it's just this different story that we're told about it. But analyze all the super heavy stone. And why in the scriptures is it always talking over and over again about stone? These people are building with stone, they're building with stone. And when you describe our civilization, you'll never talk about any of us building with stone. If you describe our civilization, stone's not going to be in the description. It's plastic, lumber, maybe some steel, some glass, but that's basically it. Like, you're not saying, yeah, they built cities out of stone. That doesn't happen nowadays. And it didn't happen when the cowboys and coal miners were living in cabins. Like, a different civilization built all of the stone stuff. And when you analyze all of the stone architecture across the whole country, you look at the symbols, you look at the people on it, you look at what's depicted inside of it, that's what it's all screaming is, this is so much older than you've been told, and it matches what the scriptures are saying. 2 Nephi 5:17, I did cause my people to be industrious and to labor with their hands. They're industrious. And he also was desirous, so they kind of wanted Nephi to become a king, but Nephi is like, not a good idea to have a king. And so, but he's like, nevertheless, I did for them that which I could, that which was in my power, but he never propped himself up as a king, and he didn't allow them to do that either. And regardless, they were still building and prospering tremendously. Okay, and touching back again on the Nephites separating from the Lamanites, just as we saw earlier in the Old Testament, right here in Genesis 17:14, God created a physical mark on people's bodies that separated his people, the people of the covenant, from the other people. And at that time it was circumcision. And anyone who wasn't circumcised would be cut off from the people. It was a way of differentiating between God's people and other people. Okay, the same thing happened when the Nephites and the Lamanites separated. God created a physical differentiator so that they don't mix and mingle, so God's people are separate from the other people. And 2 Nephi 5:21 tells us what that was, and it says that the Lord did cause a skin of blackness to come upon them. This is why the Native American Indians have darker skin. It's because the Lamanites, when they separated, God put a skin of blackness upon them. He darkened their skin. And that's the physical differentiator that God chose to use to keep his people separate from the other people. So once again, we see that God absolutely divides. And we also see again, he destroys. He destroys Jerusalem, but he says, hey, this one family, I'm going to escape you, seed of Joseph. We're going back to the spot, giving you another shot. Part of the family that he takes over there starts to do wicked. So he goes, okay, let's separate, let's divide, and don't mix. And here's a mark on the body so that you don't mix with each other. And then it says that Nephi consecrated Jacob and Joseph. So those two children of Lehi, Nephi's brothers that were born when they were once they'd escaped from Jerusalem and were on the way to the promised land, and Lehi reads the plates of brass, and he figures out, like, God covenants with him that you're the seed of Joseph, you're going back to the promised location, that whole thing. And then Lehi goes, okay, just to clear everything up for anybody in the future, I'm naming my kids Jacob and Joseph, because that's the thing that's happening right here. And now we're seeing that Nephi consecrates Jacob and Joseph to be priests and teachers over the land of my people. So we see now that there's a hierarchy of priests being established. The priesthood, the hood of priest, is being put into place right now. And after that, the follow-up verse to that is, it came to pass that we lived after the manner of happiness. Now, I'm going to say the manner of happiness is just that. It's saying we lived after the manner of happiness, which is the priesthood, the hierarchy of priests, this collection of priests, this hood of priests living correctly as they're supposed to be living. And so you could say that this manner of happiness is, I'll show you some verses right here from the Old Testament to help us see this even better, but is the order of the sun as it was first called, or the order of Melchizedek, or the holy priesthood. So as we see right here in Psalms 110:4, it says, thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So we learn that there's this order of Melchizedek, and that there's a priest ordained that become part of that order. And Hebrews 7:17 says, thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And then if you go to Doctrine and Covenants, which is Joseph Smith, we're going to talk about Joseph Smith in a little bit, but he translated ancient Egyptian writings, which is what we're reading right now, the Book of Mormon. And then he also documented things as he was doing that, and the things that he documented, that's what's in a book called Doctrine and Covenants. And the reason it says the priesthood is called Melchizedek priesthood is because Melchizedek was such a great high priest, but that before that it was called the holy priesthood, or the order of the Son of God. So that order of the Son, S-U-N and S-O-N, but remember they removed the S-O-N and it's just this light worship thing, but that's actually God's light. That's the S-O-N. Anyways, just saying that this order, they just established priests, and now they're living after the order, the manner of happiness, which is the priesthood, the holy priesthood, the order of the Son. Just to say the hood of priests is intact and thriving and functioning like it should, and that leads to happiness and living in a very peaceful type of manner. Okay, and then to help us understand a little bit more about these people, there were several different, like they all kind of had their own names. There were Nephites, Jacobites, Josephites, Zoramites, Lamanites, Lemuelites, Ishmaelites. So as they like grew and had more kids and stuff, there were different groups of ites that were formed. But the way that so right here, Jacob, he starts to write stuff in these records, and what he says is, I'm not going to distinguish them by these names anymore, like all these different ones. Basically, he goes to simplify things. I'm going to call the Lamanites those that seek to destroy the people of Nephi, and then all the people that are friendly with the people of Nephi, those are going to be called Nephites. So there are more than just the group of Nephites and Lamanites, but in order to like simplify and understand things and make it easier for them to write about stuff, they're just saying, okay, we're going to classify all of them into two groups, the Nephites and the Lamanites. The Nephites is just anybody who's friendly with the Nephites, and then the Lamanites is anybody who's against the Nephites. So there does ultimately just become these two different groups, and the Lamanites hate the Nephites. The Nephites don't necessarily hate the Lamanites, but obviously like it's tough to deal with people that want to kill you and take over all your land and your cities and all that. Okay, now we learn a little bit more about Joseph of Egypt and some mighty prophecies, that some things that he had predicted about the future. And these are found in the plates of brass. Again, another reason why these plates of brass are so important. Again, this Joseph of Egypt thing. This is the seed of Joseph of Egypt, of Jacob, back in the correct location. And these plates of brass are telling us even more about that. That's why these plates of brass were so important, and they had to go get them. Yes, the commandments are on them, but this seed of Joseph thing, this Joseph of Egypt and his prophecies, is tremendously important and a huge piece of it's the reason why, because that way the seed of Joseph and its records didn't get destroyed, and not just didn't get destroyed, but actually got carried with the seed of Joseph back to their correct location. And if we read in Genesis, when Joseph of Egypt was dying, he said, God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land unto the land which he sware unto Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob. And so I think what's happening here on these plates of brass is we're just getting more of the prophecies that Joseph of Egypt knew about. Joseph of Egypt said more than what's just in the Old Testament, and now we're getting some of that. So what's going on, this will be slightly confusing for a second, but I promise I'm going to clear it up. So what we have right here is Lehi speaking to his son Joseph, the one that he named after Joseph of Egypt. He's speaking to his son Joseph about Joseph of Egypt. And what he's telling him is the prophecies of Joseph of Egypt. And the prophecies of Joseph of Egypt is talking about in the future, there's going to be someone with his same name who brings forth some records, some writings, and publishes them to the world. And that person that does that, his father also is going to be named Joseph. Like I said, this gets a little bit confusing here for a second, and it just is this way. There's no really way to get around this, so just give me a second to explain this. So what's happening is Lehi speaks to Joseph about Joseph and Joseph and Joseph. All of them sons of Jacob, sons of Israel. All of them the seed of Jacob, seed of Israel. Okay, so we have Lehi speaking to his son Joseph. Remember, he named those two kids he had on the way to the promised land, Jacob and Joseph. He's speaking to that Joseph's son, and he's speaking to him about Joseph of Egypt, who's the son of Jacob. And Joseph of Egypt is talking about Joseph Smith Jr., the one who started the Mormon church and translated ancient Egyptian writings into the Book of Mormon. And that Joseph Smith who started the Mormon church and translated the Book of Mormon, he's a junior because his dad is the senior, and his dad's name was Joseph. So that's what I'm saying by Lehi speaking to Joseph, his son, about Joseph of Egypt, and Joseph of Egypt is talking about Joseph Smith Jr., whose father's name is also Joseph. All of them sons of Jacob, whose name is Israel, who was a son of Abraham. And so 2 Nephi 3:1 says, I speak unto you, Joseph, my lastborn. So Lehi speaking to his son Joseph, and he says, Thou art the fruit of my loins. I am a descendant of Joseph, who was carried away captive into Egypt. And great were the covenants of the Lord, which he made unto Joseph. And Lehi is going to tell us a little bit more now about these covenants that God made with Joseph of Egypt. We know that God covenanted with Joseph of Egypt that his seed would be taken back to the covenant location. But we're just going to get some more about what God covenanted with Joseph of Egypt. So these are what are considered the prophecies of Joseph of Egypt that are on these plates of brass that they had to go back to Jerusalem to acquire before they made it all the way to the promised land. So Lehi says, Wherefore Joseph, referring to Joseph of Egypt, truly saw our day. And he obtained a promise of the Lord that out of the fruit of his loins the Lord God would raise up a righteous branch unto the house of Israel. Not the Messiah, but a branch which was to be broken off. Again, talking about, Joseph of Egypt right here is talking about the remnant escaping from Jerusalem. And he's clarifying, he's saying God's going to raise up a righteous branch unto the house of Israel, not the Messiah, because the Messiah is expected to come through the line of David, which is the Jerusalem location, the tribe of Judah location. That's where the Messiah is going to come from. So he's saying it's not that tribe, not that location. It's a different branch to be broken off. It's that branch that escapes from the Judah, Jerusalem location, the David location, and goes to the seed of Joseph, Jacob, Abraham location. So just a reminder, 2 Kings 19:31 talked about out of Jerusalem shall go forth a remnant. Isaiah 65:9, I'll bring forth a seed out of Jacob and out of Judah, an inheritor of my mountains, and mine elect shall inherit it. Talking about that remnant escaping out of Judah, which is the seed of Jacob, going back to that covenant location. 2 Nephi 3:11, this is the Joseph of Egypt prophecies continuing right here. It says, A seer will I raise up out of the fruit of thy loins, talking about out of the loins of Joseph of Egypt, and unto him will I give power to bring forth my word unto the seed of thy loins. So God's telling Joseph of Egypt, I'm going to raise up out of your loins a seer, and he's going to have power to bring forth my word to the seed of your loins. So there's Joseph of Egypt. There's someone in his posterity that's going to bring forth word, a book, word, information, and he's going to have the power to bring it forth. And that word, that book, that information is going to go to the seed of Jacob, of Joseph of Egypt. So this is a long-term prophecy that's going on right here. Joseph of Egypt is seeing that eventually one of his seed is going to translate a book, and that book is going to go to the seed of Jacob. So what's really being said right here is Joseph of Egypt is saying that Joseph Smith Jr. is going to find and translate ancient Egyptian records, which is going to be known as the Book of Mormon. And that's this word that the Joseph of Egypt is prophesying, that someone will gain that word and then will distribute it to his seed, to the seed of Joseph. 2 Nephi 3:12 says, The fruit of thy loins shall write, and the fruit of the loins of Judah shall write. So we know that the Bible came out of Jerusalem, the Judah location. So that's what it's talking about. The fruit of the loins of Judah shall write. Judah is going to have a book, they're going to write stuff, and that's going to be the book that comes out of Judah. But it's also saying that Joseph is saying that there's going to be a book, some writings that come out of his seed. And that's what we're learning about right now. And it says right here that those two books, there's a book of Judah and then a book of Joseph, and that those two books shall grow together unto the confounding of false doctrines and laying down of contentions and establishing peace among the fruit of thy loins, and bringing them to the knowledge of their fathers in the latter days, and also to the knowledge of my covenant, saith the Lord. So that's exactly what we're reading. That's exactly what I'm doing and presenting right now. These writings of Joseph that it's talking about, that's going to come forth and be helpful in the latter days. Okay, we're in the latter days. That's what the Book of Mormon is. The Book of Mormon is the the records of the seed of Joseph that have been brought forth and that has been distributed. And so once again, we see that there's two places, two civilizations, and then there's also a book of scripture for each one of those places and each one of those civilizations. There's Jerusalem, which is the Judah, David location, the tribe of Judah, King David location, and that's the Bible. That the word that comes out of there is the Bible. But then there's the Bethel Luz location, which is the Jacob, Joseph of Egypt, and now Lehi, Nephi location, and that's where the Book of Mormon comes out of, which is the word of the seed of Joseph. So two different locations, two different civilizations, or two different tribes in two different locations, and they each have their own records of their dealings with God, their own book of scripture. Judah, Jerusalem, David, Bible, Joseph, Missouri, Bethel, Luz, Joseph Smith, Book of Mormon. And both of these books, the Bible and the Book of Mormon, are here nowadays, and they've been distributed worldwide nowadays, and they're available for everybody nowadays. And I'll talk about this more in an upcoming video, but the Mormon church is actually the church that carries the Bible to most places around the world. Like, they're the number one preacher of the Bible worldwide. They also preach the Book of Mormon, but they're like, stop any of those Mormon missionaries in white shirts and ties, and they'll also talk to you about the Bible, and they'll give you a free Bible if you want a free Bible. Like, we'll talk about this more, but they've been the ones carrying the word both of Judah and of Joseph to the world. So 2 Nephi 3:15 right here, Joseph of Egypt continues his prophecy where he's talking about this man, this seer, who will bring forth word to the seed of Joseph. There'll be the Judah Bible, and then here's the Joseph Bible. It's not a Bible, it's just another book of the records of the people of Joseph. And Joseph continues to say that his name, that man that brings forth the word of Joseph, his name shall be called after me. So Joseph of Egypt is saying, like, I even know this guy's name, and it's going to be the same name as me, which is Joseph. And the person who brought forth the Book of Mormon, which we're reading right now, is all about the seed of Joseph escaping from Jerusalem and going back to the covenant location. That guy's name is Joseph Smith Jr. Jr. because his dad's name is Joseph, so his dad is Joseph Smith Sr. And Joseph of Egypt right here, and this is taken off of the plates of brass, is saying, his name shall be called after me, and it shall be after the name of his father. So Joseph Smith Jr. translating these ancient records about the seed of Joseph escaping Jerusalem and plopping down in the covenant location again. And then long time ago, we have Joseph of Egypt prophesying that that would happen, that through his loins, there's going to come this book, this word, and the person, the seer, the man that brings it to the world is going to have the same name as me, as Joseph of Egypt, and his dad is also going to have the same name. And that's the exact case. Joseph Smith Jr. translated seed of Joseph records into, and that book has now gone worldwide, and his dad's name also Joseph. So just to recap, Joseph Smith Jr. translated writings from the seed of Joseph in the Promised Land. Joseph Smith found them, translated them, and that's what is called the Book of Mormon. And it talks about the Nephites and Lamanites, who are just that seed of Joseph that escaped out of Jerusalem and settled the Promised Land, the covenant location, Mississippi Valley, Israel Valley. So Joseph Smith Jr. brought forth the word that Joseph of Egypt prophesied would be brought forth in the future and would be published side by side, taken to the world side by side with the Judah writings, the Bible. And then another very interesting part of this is when Joseph Smith Jr. found the Book of Mormon and translated it, God told him, go to Missouri. And he took the Mormons and they went to Missouri, and when they got there, the governor goes, kill them all. Why? Well, because that's the seed of Joseph once again, and we're talking like 1840s now, very, very much closer to our current day. That happened again. So there's Lehi and Nephi fulfilling the promise of seed of Joseph going back to that location. But then, like always, it says once they get wicked, they'll get swept off and given to someone else. Okay, when it was given to someone else, the white men, right, the British Empire came and conquered, but then the Americans broke away from the British Empire and established their own thing as we think of it. Okay, well, that's when Joseph Smith found these ancient records, translated them, and as in his name Joseph also being the seed of Joseph, God said, okay, now go back to Missouri. And when they got there, it didn't last very long because the government's going, get out of here, we're going to kill all of you. Why y'all worried about the Mormons in Missouri? Is Missouri a special spot? It is. That's where Jacob's pillar's at, and a lot of other things, which I'll get around to talking about. So Joseph Smith Jr. is a grandson of Joseph of Egypt, returning to the Bethel Luz location in the 1840s with these ancient records that the seed of Joseph was keeping. And he translated those ancient records into the Book of Mormon. So Joseph Smith Jr. and the Book of Mormon is the fulfillment of the promise God made to Abraham, Jacob, Joseph of Egypt, and Lehi. Just like Lehi was the next person that God escaped out of Jerusalem and took to the location, Joseph Smith was the next person that God said, okay, you're the seed of Joseph, go back to that location. And he wasn't just the seed of Joseph, well, he was just the seed of Joseph, but along with that was also this book of which Joseph of Egypt prophesied would be translated by a guy with the same name, and his dad would have the same name. And Joseph Smith did that in the mid 1800s, translates the book of these ancient seed of Joseph writings, and God goes, go to Missouri, and the ancient conspiracy via the government goes, kill him. All right, so Lehi dies, but as Lehi dies, Nephi says, and now I, Nephi, speak concerning the prophecies of which my father hath spoken concerning Joseph, who was carried into Egypt. So Nephi is going, this thing that Lehi, my dad, told us about, I'm reconfirming that this is the thing that's happening right now. We are the seed of Joseph back in the covenant location. That's what this whole thing is all about. And he's specifically saying these prophecies of Joseph of Egypt are for real, for real. He says, he truly prophesied concerning all his seed, and the prophecies which he wrote, there are not many greater. And he prophesied concerning us and our future generations, and they are written upon the plates of brass. That's why these plates of brass were so important. It's this seed of Joseph thing. It's these ancient prophecies and this ancient covenant that God made with Abraham and then Jacob, whose name changed to Israel, and then to Joseph of Egypt. This is just that continuation. And Joseph Smith and the Mormons is also just that continuation, and we'll get much more to talking about that. So the plates of brass, yes, they contain the law of Moses, but Lehi's genealogy, which is him going, oh, we're the seed of Joseph, we're the seed of Jacob, and then it also contained the prophecies of Joseph of Egypt, prophesying that there's going to be this Joseph Jr. with a dad named Joseph that's going to translate writings from the seed of Joseph and publish them to the world alongside the Book of Judah, the Bible, Book of Mormon, and the Bible, all that on the plates of brass. Very important that they went back and got these plates of brass. Okay, so now let's talk specifically about what did the Nephites build? God grabbed the seed of Joseph, the Nephites, they're in the promised land, and they're starting to build. Let's take a look at what they built. And this is what is referred to as 1800, what I referred to as 1800s cowboy architecture. Because all the stories about all this stone architecture in what we now call the United States of America, the stories are silly, they're nonsense, they're lies, they're deceitful. And so who actually built it? The Nephites, not the cowboys, not the coal miners, not the pilgrims. It's the Nephites that built it. So let's see what they built, and let's see, does it match all this stone architecture across our country? And if you need to go evaluate, and I recommend that you do, go drive around, go walk around, go touch it, go inside of it, go look at it, ask yourself all these questions, ask God all these questions, and go, did the cowboys build this stuff in the 1800s? Or is this Nephite architecture? Is the Book of Mormon real? Did a seed of Joseph really escape out of Jerusalem during the time of Zedekiah when Nebuchadnezzar was about to destroy it? And they came and settled all these lands, and they built all the stuff, and we just have a lot of their stuff still left over. In fact, full cities of theirs that we're living in and occupying. Is that all true? Or is it true what we learn in the schools where somehow the cowboys and coal miners and pilgrims built castles and palaces and pyramids with extremely fine, advanced materials, and they did it all while living in cabins and teepees, and they never had any stone for roads. So here's a look at some of the materials that the Nephites used to build. I did teach my people to build buildings and to work in all manner of wood, iron, copper, brass, steel, gold, silver, and precious ores, which were in great abundance. I, Nephi, did cause my people to be industrious. Many of you have begun to search for gold and for silver and for all manner of precious ores, in which this land, which is a land of promise unto you and to your seed, doth abound most plentifully. So that's part of what's happening in this promised land, is it's super abundant in precious ores, gold, silver, and a lot of other really fine resources. It also talks about them fortifying their cities. That's huge, thick walls of stone, fortifications, fortresses, walls, huge walls, which we'll read more about. It says they were exceedingly rich in gold, silver, precious things, fine workmanship of wood, buildings, and in machinery. This gets skipped over all the time. And of course, just like the Bible, all the depictions and imagery is just poor dirt people with wood carts and rags. And nope, they had all this super fancy, nice stuff, and they were building big buildings. They were extremely industrious, and they had machinery, and also iron, copper, brass, steel, making all manner of tools of every kind to till the ground. We'll talk more about that in a second, but like I've mentioned previously, you need to, if you're doing large scale agriculture, you need some very big machinery to help you do that. And it says exactly that right here. They made machinery. They had iron, copper, brass, steel in order to do so. And they made all manner of tools of every kind to till the ground. I mean, did they leave anything out? No, it says they had all the machinery, all the materials, and they made all manner of tools to till the ground, and also weapons of war, because the Lamanites, as the Nephites built all this amazing stuff, the Lamanites kept coming and trying to conquer it and take it over. And so they also had to, this is also why they built fortresses and fortified their cities and built and created a lot of weapons of war, is because the Lamanites were constantly trying to war and conquer their cities. And we can still see a little bit of these materials, this gold, silver, copper. Like in some places it's a little bit, in some places it's a little bit more compared to what it used to be. Like I've already mentioned, this stuff, all these stone buildings across our country, heavily pillaged. But you can still see some of these materials on them. So like Boston, Massachusetts right here, this building still has some gold on it. This is an old depiction of Boston, Massachusetts, where there used to be a lot more gold on these buildings in Boston, but now that's not the case at all. This building in Albany, New York right here, all of this up here used to be gold. Sorry, I kind of got away from me there. All this stuff up here used to be gold. Here's a picture of what that used to look like. Used to have a bunch of gold on it. Of course, that's been stripped, pillaged. And then, there's little bits of gold on some of the domes of like the Capitol buildings, like this one in Vermont right here. Vermont's a place where they have a state house instead of a Capitol building. But you can see gold right here, stone woman on top of it holding some wheat. We'll get around to breaking down the stone woman in totality. New Hampshire Capitol building, Concord, New Hampshire. You can see it's got this gold, got this gold dome on top with the gold eagle. Providence, Rhode Island, this is an old stone building, old stone bank. There's our signs that we just throw on top of it. They didn't throw signs like this that you can just tear down and put up a new one. It was all integrated and built in as part of the stone structure when they had people and stuff like that, designs, logos on their buildings. But you can see this really cool dome right here, which looks like copper and brass. Maybe that might be gold, copper and gold right here, something like that. Norwich, Connecticut. This is a big, huge steeple made of copper right here. And just this super old looking, super heavy stone building right here. Norwich, Connecticut, a little bit of gold still on top here, big stone building. Hartford, Connecticut, this is the capital of Connecticut. And you can see it's got some gold right here on top. And look, when these buildings are super gray like this, it's not because they built dull gray buildings. It's because all the colors and precious and fine stuff that added color to it has been stripped away. And then also you'll see right here, these are all different stone women right here holding different symbols. So it's just the same stone woman depicted several times, but each one is a different symbol depicting, telling a different story. Iowa Capitol building, the Capitol Palace in the middle of Des Moines, Iowa. You can still see some gold on the domes here. Amazing building. And this is a look straight up at that main dome. Lots of brass, lots of marble, lots of gold right here. Amazing, completely matching materials from the Book of Mormon. There's another look inside the Iowa Capitol building. I've shown you all this. Gold, brass, marble, bunch of stone everywhere. Amazing. This is inside of a castle in Omaha, Nebraska, and this is all gold wallpaper. And I think, yeah, like this is probably a great example of how fine and detailed things got and how advanced the Nephites were, to where, I mean, not just castles with really nice stuff, but like the wallpaper in the castles is straight gold. Insane. And this is a look at that castle, the exterior of it. Really cool castle in Omaha. Mosiah 2:7, continuing with some verses out of the Book of Mormon. They caused a tower to be erected. They caused a lot of towers to be erected. And here's a look at a tower in Chicago, Illinois. This big, huge stone castle looking type tower right here. Completely out of place. Makes no sense for cowboys and coal miners. So some other towers here that I'll show you. Williamstown, Massachusetts. This is another one in Williamstown, Massachusetts. This is in Adams, Massachusetts. This one's in Boston, Massachusetts. Just huge stone towers, obelisk right here, Boston, Massachusetts, on top of a hill. And I've showed you before that these obelisks, they need pyramid bases to have a strong foundation. So that's what this grass is right here. It's just the stone architecture, pyramid foundation that's been covered up. Norwich, Connecticut. So I brought this one in because you can see it has this little tower, but what's happened right here is the actual top of the tower has been toppled off of it. It's been taken down, stripped off. So that's why it's just completely flat on top right there, is because the whole thing that used to be up there got stripped off. Here's one in Omaha, Nebraska, big tower. Omaha, Nebraska is another castle type structure. They call it a cathedral, which we'll read about, and big stone towers on it. Big stone tower in Lincoln, Nebraska. I've shown you this one before with the priests on it and the lion head and the grapes and everything. Then we got this stone obelisk. Like I mentioned before, got to have a nice base for the obelisk in order for it to stay standing perfectly, not fall over or anything like that. Usually they cover it up with grass and just call it a hill. In this case, it's still exposed. Lincoln, Nebraska, shown you this one, huge tower. Kansas City, Missouri, this is the one that has the Sphinx out in front of it. And I said it has priests at the top holding swords. Here's a look at those priests at the top. Now we learn even a little bit more about these priests. Yes, it's priests wearing robes, holding the sword of truth, all of that. They're also Nephites. Here's a look at another tower that's just been completely stripped on top, where you just don't, it's just completely flat. Whatever used to be there shooting up much higher has been torn down. Another thing that happens is when they get to the promised land, they also discover empty cities, which makes sense if because remember when the other tribes of Israel separated from Judah, and then they got swept off the land, and then now here's this remnant escaping Jerusalem, which is the seed of Joseph, headed back to that Joseph-Jacob location. If there were some people previously there before them, then yeah, they would find cities, empty cities, and that's exactly what happened when Nephi and Laman and Lemuel got over there. That's exactly what they found. They found some empty cities. So it says right here, they discovered a land which was covered with bones of men and of beasts, and was also covered with ruins of buildings of every kind, having discovered a land which had been peopled with a people who were as numerous as the hosts of Israel. They were the hosts of Israel. And that's why it's saying it like that, because we just read that those hosts of Israel got wiped off. And so now when Nephi and them are showing up to those locations, it's like, wow, some serious destruction has gone through these lands. Empty buildings, bones of men and beasts all over the land, but there's still buildings of every kind. And obviously this was a land peopled with a people as numerous as the host of Israel. It also talks about breastplates and brass and copper, and that they were perfectly sound. Also talks about their swords. Again, just when you see these armed, robed people depicted everywhere, Nephites. They began to build buildings and repair the walls of the city. This is another thing that they did a lot of times, is some of these old cities, they repaired them and started to inhabit them. There's also some other disasters that we'll read about, where after those disasters happened, then they went and repaired some cities. And you can see exactly that when you go analyze this stone architecture all over the country. Some of it looks like it's been repaired, and that's very accurate according to the text right here. When this new seed of Joseph came to the promised spot and started to settle those lands, they're finding empty buildings and lands that have been destroyed, and they're starting to repair stuff. And when you look at all of the stuff nowadays, it's like yeah, it looks like a lot of this has been repaired. And it talks about the walls of the city right here. I'll talk more about walls in just a second, but I'll give you an example of walls of a city right here. This is a video that's on my We Zombie Cities Tour channel, the channel where I go like city by city, state by state, showing you things. Here's just a little snippet from one of those videos in Nelson, Ohio. These are called Nelson ledges, and they're not ledges that Mother Nature built. It's just very obviously an ancient stone wall covered in dirt and shrubs. We're gonna be exploring this ledge. I'm calling this a wall, and I'll fill you in more as we go throughout the video, but I believe this is a massive ancient rock wall built by an ancient civilization here in this country, on this continent, and it's been flooded and buried / destroyed. If you want to see that video, it's this one right here, College Castle Ledges, on my We Zombie City Tours channel. Continuing with some scriptures where it talks about, you know, the cities they're building and stuff. Says again, they tilled the ground, very difficult to do. Just read that they have machinery to do that. Built many elegant and spacious buildings, ornamented them with fine work of wood, all manner of precious things, gold, silver, iron, brass, ziff, copper. Spacious palace, fine wood, ornamented with gold and silver and with precious things, all manner of fine work within the walls of the temple, fine wood, copper, brass, a tower near the temple, a very high tower, many buildings, a great tower to be built on the hill, tower built on a hill, planted vineyards round about the land, built wine presses, gold, silver, precious things, till the ground, build buildings. They were industrious, they labored exceedingly. So here's some more stone depictions of what I think is a lot of these left over from them, depicting that they labored, they were industrious, they really built things, and they had tools and machinery in all manner to do so. So right here we see like some buildings being built. This right here is the square, the measurement tool right there, and then back here behind it, a little blurry, but you can see, let me back this out, there we go. You can see some cranes lifting things into place. And these are in Montpelier, Vermont. This is one of the Capitol buildings there. You can see like, so that it's showing some horses pulling some stuff right here. Like I think that's definitely possible, and we'll read about that in a little bit. Got a bunch of different tools inside of this cart, but then also you see back here that there's a tractor depicted in stone with, you know, tractor, some wheels on it. I think both. Like I don't think it's one or the other. Like you can use animals and you can use machinery. Here's another look where you've got this wheel over here with what seems like some water depicted behind it, and then I don't know what this is. Kind of looks like modern power lines type of a thing, with like a factory with like towers coming out of the top of the factory. And then right here, this is on the Connecticut Capitol building, Hartford, Connecticut. You can see a man tilling the earth. He's got some oxen, and he's moving the oxen to help work the land. Again, animals are absolutely useful for those sorts of things. It doesn't have to be straight machinery and technology. Like I said, it can be both. Here's another look at just some ancient people tilling the earth, working the land. This is in Hartford, Connecticut. Some more verses. Increase in riches, trade one with one another, and wax great. Cunning and a wise people. Remember we talked about cunning, advanced, prosperous, smart, intelligent, crafty. They were a cunning and a wise people. And they began to be very numerous, scatter abroad upon the face of the earth, building large cities and villages in all quarters of the land. So they spread out, populated everywhere, and were building everywhere. Exceedingly rich, abundance of flocks, herds, fatlings of every kind, abundance of grain, gold, silver, precious things, silk, fine twined linen, all manner of good homely cloth. So they're rich and prospering with all of it. Herds, animals of all sorts of kind. They've got gold, silver, all these precious things, and then also their clothing is really fine twined silk and really nice clothing. Like every little bit of like being mankind and living and building in cities and what that consists of, like they're doing it all, and it says they're exceedingly rich, like beyond rich. And it's not talking about like a family here or there that's super rich. They're just saying this to describe the whole of the Nephites, like all of them, and they're spreading out in all quarters of the land doing all of these things. Some of the weapons of war that it talks about: swords, scimitars, bows, arrows, stones, slings, exceeding riches, fine silks, fine twined linen, many flocks and herds, gold, silver, all manner of precious things obtained by their industry. Just like we've got a bunch of different industries nowadays, they had industries, and they were industrious and very prosperous, and the materials it's constantly mentioning are way better materials than we use nowadays. Nowadays, the materials that they used in abundance and that they were using all the time are like the scarcest, barely see them, barely use them, most expensive type of stuff nowadays. They had cities, villages, and small villages. So it wasn't just all huge, massive cities. They had that, but then they also had smaller ones as well. Temples, sanctuaries, synagogues, built after the manners of the Jews, because that's where they came from. They came out of Jerusalem. When Nephi built a temple, he built it similar to Solomon's temple, because that's where he'd just come from. So now they're building sanctuaries, temples, synagogues, just like the architecture that they were used to back in Jerusalem, which had very heavy Egyptian influence. Riches, gold, silver, precious stones, synagogues, more synagogues, king's palaces, houses, streets. They had streets, hills, pyramids, temples, synagogues, prisons, costly apparel, ringlets, bracelets, ornaments of gold, precious things. Okay, now these two verses in particular, I'm going to show you a specific painting that really shows us these things. So right here, it's talking about the Nephites, and they had breastplates and arm shields, shields to defend their heads, and they were also dressed with thick clothing. So that's a description of the Nephites. Now here's a description of the Lamanites: swords, scimitars, bows, arrows, stones, slings, and they were naked, save it were a skin which was girded about their loins. And this specific story is the Lamanites come to wage war against the Nephites, and the Nephites are wearing breastplates, arm shields, they got helmets on their heads, and they have thick clothing, is what it says. And then it says that the Lamanites had basically, just their bows, arrows, and stuff, but then they were naked except for a little bit of skin covering their loins, their genitals. And so what happened, what the story says, is when the Lamanites came and they were just basically naked, and then they saw the Nephites strapped up with armor and wearing super thick clothing, they got super scared and they ran away. Okay, what do we see right here inside of the New York Capitol building? We see exactly that. We see a Nephite with super thick clothing and a naked Lamanite right here battling each other. And it shows them like their legs wrapped around them to even show us even more like these are brothers battling each other, like they're intertwined. This is the same blood right here. This is all seed of Joseph right here. But they separated because the Lamanites got mad and all that, and now they're waging war against the Nephites, and the Nephites are strapped with armor and super thick clothing, and the Lamanites are naked. And I think, yeah, and I know a lot of people look at this and go, oh, this is just like Pilgrims and Indians, Native Americans. Well, the Native Americans are the Lamanites, the seed of Joseph. They're Lamanites. And the ancient conspiracy, because all of this stuff is all over these buildings everywhere, they just made up another story. And it was, oh, Native American Indians and cowboys and pilgrims. Like, but what's actually being depicted on all this architecture that matches all of the materials we're reading about is the Lamanites and the Nephites. The Nephites in thick clothing and the Lamanites naked. And here's another look at this same mural that's inside the New York State Capitol building in Albany, New York. And these are very obviously Lamanites. Sorry, these are very obviously Lamanites, exactly as described in the Book of Mormon. To a T, like perfectly matches. And then that and these two images right here surround this woman right here, the stone woman, which I've talked about, robed, got her foot on the firmament, sword of truth, a shield in this hand. Right down here, below her feet, is where I showed you that image of the Nephite wearing thick clothing and the naked Lamanite. And then these three are somewhere else on the exterior of the stone woman. And this is the building that's located in. A huge castle, once again matching what is described as Nephite architecture. Fortified structures made of stone. And what's inside of there? Nephites and Lamanites. This is the room that it's in. It's called the War Room. So here's a look at the mural up here. You can see the stone woman right there. Right here you can see that one that I just showed you, the Nephite with thick clothing battling the Lamanite, the naked Lamanite. Some more verses here: head plates, breastplates, shields, girded armor on his loins. Once again, we see right here another Nephite depicted. This is on the Hartford, Connecticut Capitol building, and it's just a Nephite right here. Thick clothing with armor, sword, exactly as the Nephites are described. Wisconsin Capitol, right here, if we zoom in, we see some robed men. Got a helmet on his head right here, a sword in one hand. Here's the eagle. Once again, these are Nephites being depicted. Upon every tower which was in the land, so lots of towers in the land. Small forts they also erected. They threw up banks of earth round about to enclose armies, and they also built walls of stone to encircle them about round about their cities and the borders of their land. And I've heard some of the most popular, there's one person specifically who's like one of the most, I'm not going to name him, but one of the most popular people that like gives tours and does lectures on like ancient Nephite stuff in America. I've heard him say several times, they didn't build with stone. They didn't build with stone. It's like, dude, you're one of the most popular people on this subject, and you're saying they didn't build with stone? What, are you not reading what the text says? Like, and this is what I say, there's just so much deception. Just go read what the text is saying, and it says they built with stone, and they encircled themselves with stone. They encircled their cities with stone. They encircled the borders of their lands with stone. So they absolutely were masons, and they absolutely built with stone. They built with other materials too, precious metals, but also stones, and yeah, also timber as well. And this is just more evidence of, okay, if there's leftovers in this land, if like these people were here before and they built this type of stuff, then we should have evidence of just stone stuff everywhere. And we do. Our mountains, our hills, our Nelson ledges, like all of this is just ancient stonework. It's not 300 billion years of glacial drift and slow tectonic plate shifting, like Mother Nature building it. Like, this is just all leftover architecture. Here's another example. So I showed you those Nelson ledges that I said it's an old ancient wall. Okay, now I'll show you the city right here that wall's guarding. We can see the wall right here. All that out there, so the horizon line, the trees at the horizon line, that's the trees that have grown on top of the rock wall, the old rock wall. And then right over here, right there, that's actually, this area right here is pretty right close to the Nelson Ledges State Park. But this whole thing, the ledges that they call it, continues on, and this is all of it that we're seeing. And it's literally covering the perimeter of this Hiram College Village crazy buildings that sit on top of this hill here. And so what I said in the Nelson Ledges video is it looks like we've got like a little kingdom up here with these buildings, very impressive buildings, and then a rock wall out there a ways that's guarding the city. See right here? It wraps all the way around, and then I spin it into this, so you can still see it out there, and then I spin it into this circle here, and all the roads come into the circle, come up to the top of this hill. So right there again, we see that just as described in the Book of Mormon, walls encircling cities, stone walls encircling cities, and that's exactly what we see over and over again. And they fortified and strengthened the land. Again, another verse where they rebuilt. Also right here it says that they had built forts of security for every city in all the land round about. And we'll look at some forts here in just a second. The Lamanites could not get into their forts of security by any other way save by the entrance, because of the highness of the bank which had been thrown up and the depth of the ditch which had been dug round about. Again, if you're throwing up really, really high banks and really, really deep ditches, machinery, you got to really have some good tools to be able to dig all that out. And this is where our star forts come from. These fortresses that the Nephites built when the Lamanites were trying to conquer them, that's where our star forts come from. And of course, there's a bunch of different stories, but so here's a look at some star forts. Fort Ticonderoga in New York. This is a fort in Kentucky. This is one in Florida. Here's one in Louisiana. Here's another one in New York. This is one in Tennessee. And all of those areas would be part of this Israel Valley, Mississippi Valley, Promised Land location. Another verse, digging up heaps of earth round about all the cities throughout all the land which was possessed by the Nephites. Like, these are huge, huge, huge projects right here. Upon the top of these ridges of earth, he caused that there should be timbers, yea, works of timbers built up to the height of man round about the cities. Okay, so yeah, also lumber, like timber, that's fine. Like, that doesn't have to be ruled out, but what can't be ruled out also is all the stone that they built with. Frames of pickets built upon the timbers round about, and they were strong and high. And then even on top of those, towers to be erected that overlooked those works of pickets, and he caused places of security to be built upon those towers. So there's towers and then places of security built on top of those towers. Like, again, just masterful projects happening right here. Caused them to erect fortifications, so many cities, strongly fortified after the manner of the fortifications of Moroni, strongholds. And then right here it talks about capital city. And if they have, and it talks about the most capital parts of the land, and many cities and many strongholds. So if they had capital cities, became exceedingly expert in the working of cement. This one's very interesting as well. This is another stone thing happening right here. Now, oftentimes we hear the word cement and we think concrete, but cement is an ingredient in concrete. I'll explain right here in just a second, but it says they also did dwell in tents. So that's a thing that happened at times, and in houses of cement. Why cement? It says right here, they did suffer whatsoever tree should spring up upon the face of the land, that it should grow up in time that they might have timber to build their houses. So they were lacking timber, so they used cement. Again, cement doesn't mean concrete. It can be an ingredient in concrete. Hang with me just a second. And it says in time that they might have timber to build their houses, their cities, their temples, synagogues, sanctuaries, and all manner of buildings. These aren't poor dirt people. They're building cities, temples, synagogues, sanctuaries after the manner of the Jews and the Egyptians. Like, they just came from the King Solomon's temple location, the most masterful mason architecture. Like, they were building some really, really awesome stuff. Okay, so to talk a little bit about cement. Cement is a fine powdery substance that acts as a binding agent in construction. So that's all cement is. It's an ingredient that acts as a binding agent. So right here it says, while often used in concrete, cement itself is not concrete. It's a component of it, along with sand, gravel, and water. So another take on this is cement is a binder. And it says right here that cement mixed with fine aggregate produces mortar for masonry. These are masons. Or with sand and gravel produces concrete. So this cement is a binder, and it just depends on what you're mixing it with, and then you get the final result. If you mix it with sand and gravel, you get some concrete. If you mix it with fine aggregate, like it says right here, you can get a mortar. If you mix it with some other things, maybe you have granite or different types of marble or whatever other types of precious stones. And so it's really just an ingredient that you mix into things in order to create stones. So when it says they built with cement, we're still talking about stonemasonry. And then it says they did send forth much by the way of shipping. Okay, that's how we transport all of our goods and materials nowadays, is shipping. And there's different types of shipping. There's shipping on water, there's shipping in air, there's shipping on land, trains, semi-trucks, Amazon vans. Like, says they did send forth much by the way of shipping. If we're looking at just ships, like ships on water, which I do believe is probably the main way that they ship things around, we'll look into that a little bit more. But like right here, this is in Boston, Massachusetts, just this ridiculous stone ship design right here. Like, that's just bonkers for how intricate and big this stonework is, this stone art right here. New York Capitol building. So this is the one where I showed you the Nephites and the Lamanites inside of the building fighting each other. This is on the exterior of the building. We've got the eagle right here, and we've got the sun worship on a shield in the middle of the eagle with some pyramids right there, and then ships on water. A little bit blurry, but that's what's going on there. Rhode Island Capitol building. Up here on the top, you've got a gold guy with a spear and an anchor referring to ships on water. It also says they did enable people in the land northward, that they might build many cities, both of wood and of cement. You know, they were shipping stuff around, like not a little bit, a lot, and super heavy stuff. It says right here, shipping and building of ships and building of temples and synagogues and sanctuaries. And these ships and the shipping was very important in building the temples and synagogues and sanctuaries, because you got to be able to move the materials around. All manner of gold, silver, precious ore of every kind, curious workmen, meaning like advanced workmen that are really good at creating advanced designs, who did work all kinds of ore and did refine it. They did become rich. These are masterful projects. These aren't poor dirt people. This is advanced people with machinery, advanced designs, advanced products, and the best materials to make this stuff. And they did become rich, exceedingly rich. They also raised grain in abundance. They did multiply and wax exceedingly strong in the land. They did raise many flocks and herds and fatlings. So always alongside this masterful stonemasonry architecture is husbandry, raising grains, raising crops, working the land, farming, sowing, and all the livestock that's associated with that as well. It says their women did toil and spin and make all manner of cloth and fine twined linen and cloth of every kind. Really, really nice clothing. Increase of their fields, their flocks, their herds, gold, silver, all manner of precious things of every kind, and art. So they also had art, and they were masterful and advanced in their art, and they had incredible materials to create their art. Gold, silver, all manner of precious things for art. And when you look inside of these buildings, the exterior you can see some, but a lot of it's been stripped off. But man, in some of these, when you go inside, it's like, wow, these are masterful, masterful, masterful artists. And I've shown you some of that artwork, and it's amazing. Horses, chariots, cattle, flocks, herds, grain, lambskin. Another description right here of the Lamanites is lambskin about their loins, dyed in blood, heads were shorn, and head plates upon them. So they got a little bit more armor now, but mostly always the Lamanites are pretty naked, and you know, they're not industrious like the Nephites are, not even close. And that's why they want to come conquer the Nephites a lot, is because the Nephites got a lot of really nice stuff that they want. And then it also talks a little bit about there were many merchants in the land, so businessmen, you could say, and many lawyers and officers. Does this sound like poor dirt rag people? Nope, it sounds like us, but a lot better and a lot more advanced and a lot nicer materials. And it says that the people began to be distinguished by ranks according to their riches and their chances for learning, just like we are now. Gold, silver laid up in store in abundance, and they did traffic in all manner of traffic. Again, this is shipping, trafficking. Nowadays, trafficking is like you kind of only hear it with child trafficking and stuff, but the trafficking part of that is just moving and shipping stuff around. And in that case, it's children, which not good, but that's part of the ancient conspiracy, which we're going to get around to talking about. But it says they trafficked in all manner of traffic: air traffic, water traffic, land traffic, all manner of traffic, all the different machinery, all the different types of transportation, all the different ways of trafficking. They trafficked in all manner of traffic. It says the whole face of the land became covered with buildings, and the people were as numerous almost as it were the sand of the sea. So the whole face of the land, it says, boom, buildings everywhere, people like the sand of the sea, like extremely, extremely huge populations. What we're told about populations and we're overpopulated and we need to reduce population is all just a huge lie, huge part of the ancient conspiracy, very deceptive. And another piece of this is this happens very fast. Like this isn't hundreds and hundreds and hundreds or thousands and thousands of years. This is like quick, like they build and prosper exceedingly fast is what they say. And this word exceedingly keeps showing up. Exceedingly doesn't mean like pretty good or kind of good. It's like there's the best and then there's beyond the best, like exceedingly far beyond. And it says in the space of 62 years, they became exceedingly strong and exceedingly rich. 62 years. Like, yeah, if you really are like populating and you've got all the resources and all the information and you're really masterful masons and you got all the shipping and trafficking and all that in place, you can build some really amazing stuff and you can populate in huge amounts, really, really nice cities within a really short amount of time. Once again, they did build many mighty cities. They erected a beautiful throne. They built many prisons, built up many cities, buildings, gold, silver, grain, flocks, herds. They built a great city. They were exceedingly industrious. They did buy and sell and traffic one with another. Trafficking, selling, commerce, like they were doing all of that. So this isn't something new. This isn't, oh, we're now advanced and now we figured out how to do these things. They were much more advanced than we are. All manner of ore, gold, silver, iron, brass, all manner of metals. They did dig it out of the earth. I'm gonna show you some mining projects later on in an upcoming video. To dig these things out of the earth is a tremendous task. you got to have some serious equipment and machinery, and they did. We already read, they have machinery. They're digging all these metals up out of the earth. They got everything they need to be able to do that. Wherefore they did cast up mighty heaps of earth. Mighty heaps of earth. These are huge, tremendous mining projects right here to get ore, gold, silver, iron, copper. They did work, all manner of fine work. The maximum, like they're doing it. Anything that we're doing now, they were doing it way, way, way better and on a much bigger scale. They did have silks and fine twined linen, all manner of cloth, all manner of tools to till the earth. We're hearing that again, all manner of tools to till the earth. The earth is very, very difficult to till, and they had all the tools, all manner of tools in order to till the earth, both to plow and to sow and to reap and to hoe and to thrash. It's laying it out for us, saying, guys, all the tools that you need to do the plowing, the sowing, the reaping, the hoeing, the thrashing, to pull up mighty heaps of earth and mine all its materials. Like, we had all manner of tools to do that. They did make also all manner of tools with which they did work their beasts. They very much used their animals as part of their construction, their agriculture, their masonry, and I'll get more into that in a little bit. They did make all manner of weapons of war, all manner of exceedingly curious workmanship. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about walls. Talking about walls of the city, building walls of stone to encircle them round about their cities and the borders of their lands, casting up walls round about and preparing places of resort, encircled the city of Bountiful round about with a strong wall of timbers and earth to an exceeding height. Very, very, very large walls right here. In this case, it did just previously say walls of stone. In this case, it's saying walls of timber and earth. So they were doing both. Top of the wall into the inner part of the wall. So now it's not just a wall, but there's like sections of the wall, walls of this city. And again, just some more examples right here. So we're in Adams, Massachusetts, and you see right here, you can see there's these old stone buildings right here. And then what do we see behind it, encircling the city? An old wall covered in dirt and shrubbery, but right out there, that's the old wall surrounding the city. Just like we see right here in Williamstown, Massachusetts, old brick building right here, old stone building, and what do we see behind it? Walls encircling the city, guarding it, fortifying it, protecting it. Provo, Utah, we've got some really big walls protecting this city right here. And then we go to Lehi, Utah, a little bit north of Provo, Utah. Oh yeah, and also the obelisk right there, right? And then same thing in Lehi, Utah, another obelisk. And we've got just these huge walls surrounding the cities. They also had highways and paved roads. Right here it says by the highway which led to the chief market, which was in the city. And then it also says there was a tower which was also near unto the garden gate by which led the highway. They had highways, chief markets, towers, and highways connecting all of these different places that they're building. And many highways and many cities and many highways were cast up, and many roads made, and they led from city to city, from land to land, from place to place. Exactly like we think about stuff now and how things are now, but way better, because they were way more advanced at architecture and all of this. Highways were broken up, level roads were spoiled. We'll read about some of that destruction, but again, just saying that they had highways and they had level roads and they had paved roads, and so where's all this dirt roads come from? Like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, the people who built this stuff, they had highways, they had leveled roads, paved roads, they had waterways. Like, the stuff that we see, all these stone buildings, all this stone architecture, it doesn't get built on dirt. So once again, just some examples of some highways, some bridges, some roads across our country that I believe are ancient leftovers from the Nephites mainly. But like we read earlier, like they found empty cities and stuff. So I think we even have stuff before the Nephites, let's say, show up to this land 550 BC-ish. Well, I think there's stuff in this land. We know there's stuff in this land even older than that, because when they got here, they found stuff, and some of it they repaired and started to use. So, I mean, the stuff in this land, it goes far back, way, way farther back than what we've been told. Here's just another huge highway with some trains running on it. Another picture of what these cities used to look like, because we still see some of them exactly like this, but we're just, we don't have the whole height of them anymore. I showed you this one before. See, like if you've got canalways, elevated canalways, and water can support a lot of weight, that's a great way to transfer materials. Also just a really nice way to travel around on still, calm water. That would be awesome. I showed you these guys, the guardians of traffic in Cleveland, Ohio, that sit right here on this highway as you're entering Cleveland. That also crosses over this river right here. Some more highways over here. I'm not saying that like this one right here, this one looks definitely new to me, like we built this one. So the point I'm making isn't that all of our highways are leftover, but some of our highways are leftovers. And really the main point, even more than that, is that these people had highways. They were advanced. Boston, Massachusetts, you got this huge stone highway right here. I definitely think is a leftover. Portland, Maine, got this huge highway right here, and it intersects and connects with other pieces of it, like you can see right here. Herkimer, New York, Big Stone Bridge. This is the Erie Canal, which is a water highway, you could call it. And now let's talk about city foundations, because nowadays we build like a little bit of foundation for a house and then we use our sticks to build the rest of it. But like these people weren't building foundations for small houses. They built foundations for their cities, which is pretty wild to think about. Imagine if we built an entire foundation for a big city nowadays. That's just not something we do. Like we literally do the bare minimum to be able to build some stuff right now. Like we're nothing close to entire foundations for big stone cities. So, but it says the Nephites began the foundation of a city. They called the name of that city Moroni. And they also began a foundation for a city between the city of Moroni and the city of Aaron, joining the borders of Aaron and Moroni. So now they're building foundations for cities and foundations for other cities, and they're connecting their cities, and they're connecting them with highways and paved roads, which we just read. They lead from city to city, land to land, border to border. All right, so now let's talk about some tech, like actual technology as we think about it. We already talked about machines, which that's definitely technology, but we can get a little bit more specific with some things here. So even if we go to the Old Testament, it says in 2 Chronicles 26:15, they made in Jerusalem engines, and they were invented by cunning men. All right, so here's this word cunning again, which is advanced design. And these cunning men who are good at advanced design, they invented engines. I'm sure a lot of people would try and explain this away as like, oh no, engines mean something else, or this. Like, I'm reading it for what it says. It says cunning men who were very smart and intelligent and could come up with really crafty advanced designs. They designed engines in Jerusalem. Jerem 1:8, this is in the Book of Mormon, says they had machinery. We already read that one. We also read other times in the Book of Mormon where it talks about cunning devices. Now, this is one where maybe it isn't, I don't know, we call our phones and computers like devices. We literally call them devices. So when it's talking about cunning devices, advanced devices, maybe it's literally talking about technological devices, like designed, advanced designs of devices, products. Again, cunning, and it means executed with or exhibiting ingenuity. Alma 11:21, expert in the devices of the devil, which, you know, we're going to learn a lot about the ancient conspiracy. The Book of Mormon does a great job of talking about it, and it says that the evil people create devices to drag people down to hell, to mess with God's people. And I mean, you could definitely say that about our phones, right? Like the internet, like, has it really made things, it's made navigation easier, but is it really improving us as a people? Is it bringing us closer to God, to Jesus Christ, to living in those types of, it's not. And in fact, you could definitely look at it and go, these devices of ours are making things worse. And when you read the Old Testament, the Book of Mormon, it's talking about evil people inventing devices. Job 5:12 right here, disappointeth the devices of the crafty, so that their hands cannot perform their enterprise. So again, we're talking about crafty people, crafty men, and they're creating devices to perform their enterprise, their business, to sell things and make money, and it's saying crafty devices. Alma 30:57, back in the Book of Mormon. This is a really interesting one. It says that they immediately published a message throughout all the land, a proclamation. It says the proclamation was sent forth by the chief judge to all the people in the land, and it says it was immediately published. These are big populations. Even if it's not a big population, this was like, how do you immediately publish it to everybody? if it's a big population, now it's really like, how do you publish it immediately to everybody? Well, if you look at nowadays, you jump on Facebook and you publish a post and it's immediately published to everybody. So I would say that's what we're talking about right here. Not necessarily Facebook, but we're talking about technology, machinery, advanced designs where they need to publish something to all the people in the land. It's not just saying in a city, it's saying in the land. And it says they immediately published it throughout all the land. An immediate publishing sounds like the only way we can immediately publish stuff nowadays is through technology. So if they're immediately publishing messages to all the land, I think there's some technology that's allowing them to do that. And just a reminder from the Old Testament, I'm not going to recap this in depth, but we talked about thin gold wires. They worked gold into thin plates and then they cut it into wires. And gold is one of the main materials used in like electronics and stuff nowadays. And so here's just a look at some thin gold wires and some of our cunning work that we use thin gold wires for: computer chips. Very interesting. Silver, gold, copper, some of the main conductive elements for conducting electricity. And we've read over and over and over again, they have no shortage of silver, copper, and gold, and they're masterful at mining it and turning it into very advanced, curious, cunning designs that these people are using. And then the Book of Mormon also talks about the Liahona, and it describes it as a round ball of curious workmanship, and it was of fine brass. And curious workmanship, once again, is similar to cunning workmanship. It's just talking about advanced design. And it says it was, and I'm not going to go through the whole story about the Liahona, but what it says that it does is it was written that there's a screen on it basically, and that there's some writings that pop up on it that change from time to time. But the interesting thing about it is that it worked according to the faith and the diligence of the people that had it. So like, as long as they were faithful and diligent towards God and keeping his commandments, then this device worked really well. But when they stopped, then it didn't work anymore. So another way you could say what the Liahona is, it's a faith-based GPS, because it also gave them directions where to go, but then also gave them messages about things. So it says, so the Liahona, you could say, is a faith-based GPS with text display made of fine brass. Now, it also says that the Lord himself is the one who designed the Liahona. But if they have that Liahona and they've been using it for a while, and now they're extremely industrious, they've got all these materials, they're prospering, they're trafficking, shipping, building cities, synagogues, temples, highways, palaces, I think it's probably safe to say that some part, at least in some sense, the Liahona was reverse engineered, and maybe some similar types of products were designed by some of these cunning men that knew how to work in all manner of workmanship with brass and silver and copper and iron and gold and all the stones also. I don't think that's far-fetched at all. And then the Book of Mormon also talks about the Urim and the Thummim, which we talked a little bit about in the Old Testament. But you could look at that as it is some type of technology. And it says in the Book of Mormon that they were also called interpreters, because they could be used to interpret old languages like that you didn't know how to interpret. You could use these stones, this Urim and the Thummim, to interpret things. And then the Old Testament talked about how those two stones, the Urim and the Thummim, go into the breastplate of judgment. And it doesn't say exactly what that does. But again, we're seeing these Urim, the Urim and the Thummim being potentially used in a technology, what we'd think of as technology type of way. And then also it talks about staffs and rods and scepters, which is, I don't have I don't know really what they're saying with all this, but it does seem like advanced products right here. Golden scepter is mentioned in Esther 5:2 in the Old Testament. We look at the floor of the Nebraska Capitol right here. It shows God with the eagle and Jacob's pillar behind it, and he's holding a rod. When Moses and Aaron did all of their miracles, they always had a rod. Right here on the exterior of the Capitol building, we see another ancient stone man depicted, and he's holding a rod in his hand. And then it also talks about many waters in the land of the Nephites, the Mississippi Valley, the Israel Valley. It says they had large bodies of water and many rivers. And it says that they did pitch their tents around Hill Cumorah, which is where Joseph Smith eventually gets the gold plates from, that he translates into the Book of Mormon. We'll talk about that later. But it says, and that was in upstate New York. And it's described that as a land of many waters, rivers, and fountains. And that's still true right now to that location. There are a lot of waters and rivers up there. Also talks a lot about the River Sidon as like their main river. And I would say that that's the Mississippi River, because they went to the Promised Land, the seat of Joseph and Jacob location. Jacob marked his spot with a pillar. There's the pillar in St. Louis, Missouri, which sits on the Mississippi River, the mightiest river that feeds the whole Promised Land. So when they're talking about the River Sidon as like their main river over and over again, I think the River Sidon is the river that we now call the Mississippi River. And this is just one look at one waterway. This is just the Erie Canal right here. So the Erie Canal down here in New York, up here to Albany, and you can take it over to the Great Lakes. And once you hit the Great Lakes, that opens you up into all these other areas. And if you can get over here to Chicago on some water, well, now you're close to the Mississippi River, and you can use all of its waters and tributaries. So this is just the Erie Canal right here and what it can connect you to. And so, yeah, I think absolutely lots of rivers, lots of navigating and moving on water. And frankly, we should still be doing that nowadays. We do it a little bit, but not even close to what we should be doing. And a lot of that too is also because, like I explained about the ancient conspiracy in the last video, they dry up the water. If you pay attention and you do your research on all these areas and all the different rivers and stuff, like, it's common over and over and over again to find in these places attached to these stone cities, empty canals, empty rivers, water that's been dried up, waterways that have been decommissioned over and over and over and over again. So this is what I'm saying right here. If you can just hit the Erie Canal and you can move over here, get close to like Chicago, well, now you can hit all these other waterways and you can just continue to travel all of the United States of America minus the Rocky Mountains and over, all the Mississippi Valley, Israel Valley. You can travel all of it by water, especially back then when they had less that was dried up. Yeah, that's completely accurate. And then it also talks about their pyramids. They went into an exceedingly high mountain. So again, going into a mountain, into a pyramid. The word pyramid never is in the scriptures, but the scripture people definitely, we know, definitely from those time periods, pyramids were being built. So when it's never saying the word pyramid, but it's always saying mountains, mounts, and hills, and they're going in and out of them, it's pyramid architecture that we're talking about. So right here, into an exceedingly high mountain. Go forth up into the top of the mountain. Go into the top of the pyramid. Get thee into the mountain. Went up into the mountain. So we're going in and out of mountains. Go into the mount oft. It says Nephi went into the mount often to pray. Into the pyramid, in and out of the pyramid, often. Into the mount Antipas, upon the mount, foot of the mount. Come down off from the mount. So it's not always going in and out of them, but that's definitely happening. Sometimes they are going up and down them, on top of the mount, into the mountains, upon the mountains, dwelt upon the mountains, up upon the mountains, hills, mountains, strongholds, secret places, mountains, unto the mount, exceeding height, upon the top of the mount, up into the mount, came down out of the mount. Another very clear one right here. Went in it and then came out of it. Go to the hill, a great tower built on the hill. And if we look at this picture, I think I've showed this previously, but Royalton, Vermont, very obviously a pyramid right here. You can even see some of its terracing still, but it's just completely covered with dirt and shrubbery. And this isn't like very old shrubbery. This is very new, like newly planted shrubbery. So these were exposed not long ago. And a lot of them have just been covered up with government projects, government tree planting projects. Bennington, Vermont, I showed you this one previously. It's got this huge obelisk right here. Here's a different look at this mount behind it, this pyramid behind it, covered in dirt and shrubbery. Here's another angle of it. This is in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Got this pyramid, all this pyramid architecture sitting out here. Denver, Colorado, big pyramid. Capitol Reef, got some pyramids sitting in ruin. San Diego, California, bunch of pyramids in California. It's not like They're down in Mexico, but there's some magic border between Mexico and the United States, and there's no continuation of it. Like, we got pyramids everywhere, guys. San Clemente, California, here's some pyramids exposed. All this back here is just more pyramid architecture. And this is all blocked off as you can't come in here. This is a conservation area. We're protecting the birds and the worms. San Clemente, California, again, another angle of one of those pyramids. You can see on top here, just very crispy pyramidion. It's got that nice triangle shape on top of it. Ranchita, California, just more pyramids sitting in ruin out here. Fresno, California, you can make out that these are definitely some sort of pyramid architecture sitting out here, covered in dirt and shrubs. Moapa, Nevada, ancient pyramid, Pyramid Lake in California. These are all pyramids right here, and they even call it that. And then if you look right here, the sign that they give is that an actual pyramid shape, that triangle shape. So yeah, I mean, all this is just actually pyramids. And you can see a little piece of it exposed right there. Here's another look at it where you can see some, you know, it's not all super obvious, but there's plenty of obvious ones. Like, yeah, this is all just pyramid architecture. So continuing with some verses, upon the top of the hill Manti came upon the hill, taught them upon their hills, teaching and speaking unto the people upon the hill Anaida. And so once again, they're just oftentimes talking about hills. And I think we can very much just say that hills are architecture and not just like lumps of dirt or whatever. Like this right here, the Great Pyramid of Cholula. Okay, well, if they were going and teaching on top of the hill, was there a palace on top of the hill? And let's analyze this hill more, because when we look at this hill, well, it's just old stone pyramid architecture with a palace on top of it. So I would say they built hills out of stone, and that's why they're using their architecture and going up and down them and teaching on them and congregating on them. And I think we're literally just talking about architecture. You can see this hill, if you just excavate the dirt and shrubbery, it's not a Mother Nature hill, it's pyramid architecture that was man-made. And I pointed this book out earlier, but this is another book where it's deceptive, it's super dumbed down, but it does talk about hills, mounds, mounts, pyramids being built all along the Mississippi Valley. All those waters that I just showed you that branch off of the Mississippi River, it talks about previous civilizations building hills, mounds, and mounts. It dumbs it way down. It doesn't really tell you the full, like, how it actually was, but still, like, it's even a documented thing by the federal government and the Smithsonian. And here's a picture from inside of that book. This is what I'm saying, like, they just dumb it down so much, where here we're seeing that same thing depicted, where you've got some palace on top of a hill, but just like we saw that Cholula pyramid in Mexico. Okay, well, let's take the dirt and the shrubbery off this hill, and what are we actually looking like? It's looking like a pyramid architecture with a palace on the top of it. But when you come to this book and read about it, it'll tell you, oh yeah, it's just a dirt hill, and yeah, some little type of structure on top of it. But it's like, no. It's pyramid architecture built by advanced people with all these insane materials that we've been reading about, with a super nice palace on top of it. Here's another example in California. This is in San Simeon, California, on the coast. This is Hearst Castle. So I'd say this is the same thing, where we're seeing like a palace on top of a hill. You can see all these hills, mountains, pyramids behind it. But now if we look below it, there's all of this right here covered in dirt and shrubbery, which I would say is just that same thing that we saw right here, that we saw with this Cholula pyramid in Mexico. Same thing right here in San Simeon, California, but just the dirt and the shrubbery is still sitting there, hasn't been excavated. Unto the hill, there I have deposited unto the Lord all the sacred engravings concerning this people. So we see sacred records, sacred engravings being deposited in a hill, in a pyramid. Hid up in the hill Cumorah all the records. Again, records being put inside of a hill, a pyramid. Here's a look at Hill Cumorah in New York City. This is where eventually in the Book of Mormon, what happens is all the records of the Nephites that have been kept on gold plates, they got hid in the hill Cumorah, in the pyramid Cumorah. And then Joseph Smith, a bunch of years later, he goes and pulls them out of the hill Cumorah and translates them, and that becomes the Book of Mormon, which is what we're reading right now. And so it says that those ancient records were hid up in the hill Cumorah. This is the hill Cumorah in New York. It looks a bit different than this now. This hill, this pyramid, has been kind of reworked and reshaped quite a few times. I'll get to that in a future video when we talk about like the origin of the Book of Mormon and more about Joseph Smith and all of that. It says right here, from the top of the hill Cumorah, pitched their tents by the hill Ramah, the same hill where my father Mormon did hide up the records. And then another thing about the Nephites is they had some different systems of government. They did eventually do some kings, and that didn't go very well. So then they tried a system of judges, and we're gonna all explain all this, but then that got infiltrated, and that got corrupted, and then they kind of just split into separate tribes without even really having much of a government. We'll talk more about that, but just laying that out as more of part of just like what they were up to. Like they had, they tried different types of governments as well. Okay, now we're going to look at the time period when Jesus was murdered in Old Jerusalem, in the Jerusalem where they escaped from, we're 600 years past that now from when they left Jerusalem and went to the Promised Land. So now we're close to the year like 30 AD, I guess you would say, 33 AD. And so when Jesus Christ dies, when he's murdered in Old Jerusalem, there's some things that happen in this Promised Land covenant location where the Nephites are at, the Mississippi Valley, Israel Valley. And it says, there arose a great storm, such as one as had never been known in all the land. And it did shake the whole earth. And there were also sharp lightnings. And it says, the city of Zarahemla did take fire, and the city of Moroni did sink into the depths of the sea. The earth was carried up upon the city of Moroni, that in the place of the city there became a great mountain. The whole face of the land was changed. Highways were broken up. The level roads were spoiled. Great and notable cities were sunk. Many were burned. Many were shaken till the buildings thereof had fallen to the earth. There were some cities which remained, but the damage thereof was exceedingly great. The rocks were rent in twain. They were broken up upon the face of the whole earth, insomuch that they were found in broken fragments and in seams and in cracks upon all the face of the land. For the space of 3 days there was no light seen, because Jesus Christ, the Son, S-U-N and S-O-N, had just been murdered. So it went dark for 3 days. And then I'll come back to this verse in just a second. But I want to talk a little bit about this destruction that occurred. Because so far, they found some old cities, they repaired them, and they built a bunch of new cities. They spread out across all the land, built buildings in all the quarters of the land, extremely prosperous and populous, and huge civilizations, masterful architecture everywhere. But then Jesus Christ gets murdered, and all of this destruction happens to the land. And so we can learn a couple things here, and it describes, it helps us understand our current land a lot better. So it says the whole earth shook, and then it describes several cities getting destroyed. So it says Zarahemla took fire. Then there's a city called Moroni that got sunk into the depths of the sea, just sunk and gone. It says the inhabitants thereof were drowned. And this is part of God destroying the wicked people at this time, and we'll see that the righteous were actually survived. They were protected and they survived, but the wicked people got destroyed, and the wickedest cities, they got destroyed. Some of them caught fire, some of them sunk into the sea. And then right here it says the earth was carried up upon the city of Moroni, that in the place of the city there became a great mountain. And so this verse is interesting because I do think most of the time our mountains are man-made. Our mountains and hills were built and are just pyramid architecture. But there is an instance right here where there were mountains that were created, but they weren't like it says right here, there was earth carried up upon the city of Moroni, and that formed a great mountain. So however that happened, earth was cast up over the city and just completely covered it, and it stuck that way, and now there's what you'd call like a mountain right there. But I think that's pretty much the closest we get to Mother Nature building mountains and hills. I definitely don't think, I believe it's 100% a lie, this story of 300 billion years of tectonic plates slowly shifting and glaciers slowly drifting over hundreds and hundreds of billions of years, and that's how mountains were created. The scriptures never ever talk about that. They do talk about people going in and out of mountains a lot. They talk about people, we'll read it in a little bit, building mountains, casting up mountains. And then we also do hear about some disaster right here where a city gets completely buried, like cast up type buried, like encompassed, like covered with dirt, and that becomes known as a mountain. But like I said, I think that's as close as we get to Mother Nature casting up mountains. And I wouldn't even say this isn't Mother Nature casting up mountains. This is like intentional disaster that God's sending because God just got murdered. Jesus Christ just got murdered, and God's destroying the wicked people at this time. So these are intentional events to intentionally destroy specific cities and the people in those cities. And it also says the whole face of the land was changed. So that also, you could also say maybe there's just some, when it shifted and earthquakes and stuff, and maybe some pieces of land did pop up, and maybe those are kind of hills or mountains that we'd think of. But again, I think this is as close as you get to mountains being made by Mother Nature. Most of it's just pyramids. But there is this instance, and maybe there's, you know, like flood of Noah, maybe something like this back then, but I think there's no instance where it's 300 billion years of this geological story that we've been taught in schools. I think this is the only exception to man-made mountains, is this type of disaster. When God sends this disaster, sure, maybe you get some earth changing and some things happening where now there's like some mountains, some dirt hills and stuff like that, but it happens fast. This is in the matter of like, this is within a matter of hours. Like Noah's flood, that was within a matter of hours. Like these aren't even days. It's definitely not hundreds of billions of years. Okay, and it says notable cities were sunk. So cities were sunk, it says many were burned. And if you look at some of our cities, a lot of the stone, you can see burn marks on them. And then also buildings were shaken and fallen to the earth. And then it also says that rocks were rent in twain. They were broken up upon the face of the whole earth, insomuch that they were found in broken fragments and in seams and in cracks upon all the face of the land. Okay, you can see this everywhere. You can see evidence of old stone cities just tumbled and cracked and sitting, tossed around everywhere. Like you can go to places and it's just tumbled rock everywhere. And if you know the stories and what the scriptures say, it's like, okay, I understand what that is. This isn't Mother Nature 350 billion years ago. This is when Christ died. This land underwent some serious like upheaval, and cities, stone cities, got tumbled. And so when we see all these tumbled rocks, like it says, in broken fragments and seams and cracks upon all the face of the land, that's what that is. And that happened quickly, within a matter of hours, not even in the matter of days, definitely not billions and billions and billions of years. Okay, and then after all this disaster passes, the bunch of people, all the wicked died in all this disaster, but the righteous survived. And it says, and this is a huge part of the Book of Mormon right here, it says they saw a man descending out of heaven, capital M-A-N. This is Jesus Christ resurrected, coming to visit these people. And he says, I am Jesus Christ, whom the prophets testified shall come into the world. Behold, I am the light and life of the world. He's showing up to him and he's saying, it's me, I'm Jesus Christ, I'm the light and life of the world. I'm the sun, S-O-N and S-U-N, which is why it's just been dark for 3 days, because I've been dead, now I'm resurrected, here I am, the light and life of the world. The sun's back, S-O-N and S-U-N. And he says, the law that was given to Moses is fulfilled in me. I am he that gave that law. I am he who covenanted with my people Israel. The law in me is fulfilled. I have come to fulfill the law. Therefore it hath an end. This is referring specifically to the animal sacrifice, because that was all leading up to his sacrifice, which was him dying, and then he resurrected, conquering death. And now that that's occurred, the law of Moses, that the sacrificing has all been fulfilled, and that's not something that needs to continue moving forward anymore, because we're not looking forward to the Son of God coming and dying and sacrificing. Like, that's happened, that's completed. So now we're moving into the next phase of the law, God's commandments, how he wants us to live. And he's just explaining to them, because they've been living the law of Moses, saying, hey, that's all complete now. We don't need to do the sacrifice thing anymore. I did the ultimate sacrifice. It's over. I beat it. I conquered it. I'm resurrected. Now we don't have to do sacrifice anymore. He says, the covenant which I have made with my people is not all fulfilled, meaning this Abrahamic covenant that he covenanted with his people and their seed for forever, and him coming down and establishing his kingdom on earth. There's still a lot of that has to occur, but the leading up to his sacrificial death and resurrection, that's all completed. And he says, behold, I am the law, I am the light. And the New Testament, he talks about this, because they're they're coming to him and they're saying like, hey, we're living the law, we're doing it right, and we don't believe you. And he goes, but I am the law. I'm the one who gave that law. I'm the fulfillment of that law. If you were actually about that law, if you did love it, if you were really practicing it and living it correctly, you'd be accepting me right now. You'd realize who I actually am and what I'm actually telling you. And he comes to the Nephites, and that's what he's saying. He's like, I am the law. I am the light. And they were much more believing than the Jews in Jerusalem, who they did believe, some of them, right? But ultimately they were convinced by the high priest of the Jews, the high priest of the King Solomon's temple, that we need to kill this man. He's saying he's God, but there's no way that that could be, so we should definitely kill him. But he resurrected, and he's saying, I am the law. I am the light. I am the Son, S-O-N and S-U-N. And he says, now the new law, this is the law. Keep my commandments. And I'm not going to get into this right here, but he does at this point give them some new commandments. And they're, it's not like, here's all these specific ways to sacrifice animals. It's much more like, look, it's much more like the 10 Commandments, like don't covet, don't steal, like it's more basic stuff. But anyways, I'd like to get into that right now, but just to keep this going, I'm not going to. But he does continue to say, this is the land of your inheritance. The Father hath given it unto you. The Father, God. This is the Son, Jesus Christ, speaking. And he says, not at any time hath the Father given me commandment that I should tell it unto your brethren at Jerusalem. So he just got murdered by the people of Judah in Jerusalem. And he's saying, I haven't actually talked to them about you and told them about you guys over here. The seed of Joseph over here in the Bethel, Luce, Mississippi River, Mississippi Valley, Israel Valley location. And he says, neither at any time hath the Father given me commandment that I should tell them concerning the tribes of the house of Israel, who the Father hath led away out of the land. Again, Jesus saying like, yeah, there's other people, there's people that I've led away, and I didn't explain this all to the people in Jerusalem because we just couldn't get to that point. Like there's other stuff I needed to try and get them to consider and accept, and like we just didn't get to the point where I could talk to them about all of you over here and all that. But he's like, you are the house of Israel. And he says, this much did the Father command me that I should tell unto them, the Jews in Jerusalem, that he said, and this is in the New Testament, it says, other sheep I have which are not of this fold. He told them that, but he just didn't elaborate on that because there's just other things that he was trying to get them to work through. And he says, because of their stiff-neckedness and unbelief, they didn't understand my word. And so he's like, I just didn't get to the point of telling them about you guys. And then now he tells the Nephites, the seed of Joseph, he says, and I even have other sheep which are not of this land, neither the land of Jerusalem, neither in any parts of the land round about whither I have been to minister. So there's even other people that he's got his eye on, that he's carried away to certain places and he's protecting. And he's like, I got other people scattered around too. So it's not just the Jews in Jerusalem and just the tribe of Joseph in the Bethel Luce location. There's other people too. Like he's got several groups of his people that he's keeping an eye on. And he's not saying, yeah, I gotta bring you all together and unite you. He's totally cool with like, yeah, you're over here, you're over here, you're over here. This whole united thing is actually part of the ancient conspiracy, which we're gonna get around to talking about. And God says, Jesus Christ says, I have received a commandment of the Father that I shall go unto them, speaking of these other people that he has to visit, and they shall be numbered among my sheep, that there may be one fold and one shepherd. Therefore I go to show myself unto them. Again, he's not saying I'm going to go to them and bring them all to one spot. He's saying I just need them to know that I'm the shepherd and that you all belong to me, no matter where you're physically located right now. Once again, he's not uniting the nations. He's not even attempting or wanting to do that. He's just like, yeah, I've got people in different places. I'm going to tell them, go show them. I'm going to show myself to them, and we're all going to have me as God. I'm the shepherd, and that's perfect, just like that. And I can connect and speak to all of you through my spirit. Okay, and then he also talks about the Gentiles, which is what we're going to think of as the white man coming to conquer the Native American Indians, which are the Nephites and the Lamanites. Because remember, it says that you get the land, but once you start to do bad things, I'm going to bring in other nations and I'm going to give them the land. So that's what's referred to as the Gentiles, the white man coming over. That's referred to as the Gentiles. And so he's saying right here, in the latter days shall the truth come unto the Gentiles, that the fullness of these things shall be made known unto them. But he says, woe saith the Father unto the unbelieving of the Gentiles, for For notwithstanding, they have come forth upon the face of this land, and have scattered my people who are of the house of Israel, and my people who are of the house of Israel have been cast out from among them, and have trodden them under feet. So Jesus right here is explaining to them, like, I'm visiting you, the seed of Joseph right here, the Nephites, but what's going to happen is the Gentiles are going to show up and they're going to scatter you. And that's the scattering of the Native Americans, who are just the seed of a Joseph that had escaped from Jerusalem, and God brought them to the promised covenant location. Then he says that the Gentiles are going to start to be wicked, and so then at that point, I'm going to start to bring you back into the land. He says, the Gentiles shall sin against my gospel. They shall reject the fullness of my gospel, which is, we are the Gentile, like the Americans in the land right now. That it's speaking about us. We're the ones rejecting the gospel, and that has been happening. We've been rejecting it, and the seed of Joseph is being let back into the country to take over their lands again. That's exactly what it's saying right here. When the Gentiles shall sin against my gospel, shall reject the fullness of my gospel, shall be lifted up in the pride of their hearts above all nations, above all the people of the whole earth, and shall be filled with all manner of lyings, deceits, mischiefs, hypocrisy, murders, priestcrafts, whoredoms, and secret combinations. If they shall do all these things and reject the fullness of my gospel, behold, saith the Father, I will bring the fullness of my gospel from among them. I'll take it away. So Jesus is talking about us right now, and he's not saying good things. He's saying lying, deceit, mischief, hypocrisy, murders, priestcrafts, whoredoms, secret combinations. They're abandoning, rejecting me and my gospel. And he says, and then will I remember my covenant which I have made unto my people, O house of Israel, and bring my gospel unto them. Thus saith the Father had commanded me, that I shall give unto this people this land for their inheritance. So this is God, Jesus, saying to the Nephites that this is going to happen. Like, your seed's going to go on for a bit, and then the Gentiles, the white man's going to come, smite you and scatter you, and they're going to have the land for a bit, but then they're going to start to reject me, and when they do that, that's when I'm going to start to bring you back into the promised location, and I'll fulfill that covenant again. So the Gentiles that conquered the Native Americans will be overtaken by those Native Americans, that seed of Joseph, returning back into the lands, which is exactly, like I already mentioned, what we're seeing right now. Happening right now. Been happening for years already. Increasing. These lands, less and less and less, are pertaining to the people that were born on this land, and is being given away to these other people that are coming back into the land, which is the seed of Joseph, the Native Americans, the Nephites and Lamanites, the seed of Jacob and Joseph, that had that remnant that had escaped out of Jerusalem and was brought back to the Jacob pillar spot, the Jacob Joseph of Egypt location, the Mississippi Valley, the Israel Valley, what we now call the United States of America. And he continues, if the Gentiles do not repent after that blessing that they've received, and after they've scattered my people, then shall ye, who are a remnant of the house of Jacob, go forth among them, and ye shall be in the midst of them, who shall be many. That's an exact description of right this second. And don't get this confused. I am not saying, yeah, let's start the war and battle. That is not what I'm getting at. I'm saying we all need to return to Jesus Christ. And because we're rejecting Jesus Christ, exactly like he's always done, exactly like he said, the land gets given to someone else. And specifically, he's bringing the seed of Joseph back onto the land. The scattered tribes are coming back onto the land. So what we all need to do, all of us together, is go, Jesus Christ. We all have a Jesus Christ problem. We all need to return to him, and that's available for all of us. That repentance, if we want to avoid destruction, getting wiped out, losing our land, all of us need to return and live according to the law and the gospel of Jesus Christ. So this remnant of the house of Jacob, the seed of Joseph, has already been returning. And he says, I will establish in this land unto the fulfilling of the covenant which I made your father Jacob, and it shall be a new Jerusalem. I'll cover new and old Jerusalem, but 3 Nephi 20:25, he says right here, ye are of the covenant which the Father made with your fathers, saying unto Abraham, in thy seed shall all the kindreds of the earth be blessed. So Jesus Christ visits the Nephites, very clearly tells them, You are the seed of Joseph. You're going to get scattered. Once the people that scattered you, the Gentiles, the white man, once they start to reject me, I'm going to bring you back and you're going to get the land again. Okay, now we're going to talk about this period after Jesus Christ visited them. There's 300 years of peace. And what happens during this 300 years of peace is they have unhindered prosperity. They prosper like to the max. And they also repair a lot of the cities. Now, some of them got buried, some of them were like unrepairable, but the ones that they could repair, they went and repaired. So again, we're seeing some cities did survive, and some were like in okay condition, some in pretty bad condition, but a lot of them were repaired. So again, when we look at all these stone cities across our country and see repair work, well, this is the reason why, because there was some serious destruction that occurred when Jesus Christ was murdered, and they had hundreds of years of prosperity after that. And during that time period, we're going to read about it right here. So it came to pass that the people were all converted unto the Lord upon all the face of the land, both the Nephites and the Lamanites, because some of the Lamanites were righteous at that time and survived also. But so there were some Lamanites that survived also. But both Nephites and Lamanites, there were no contentions and disputations among them, and every man did deal justly with one another. So all the people that were left after this disaster and Christ visited them, they all lived correctly. They weren't fighting, there weren't contentions, and every man dealt justly with one another. They had all things in common among them. Therefore there were not rich and poor, bond and free, but they were all made free and all partakers of the heavenly gift. All things common among them. That's something that we think is impossible. It's not impossible. And if you can achieve to live that way, then there is no rich and poor. It's just everybody's on the same level, which is what God wants. And the Lord did prosper them exceedingly in the land, yea, insomuch that they did build cities again, where their cities had been burned. Even that great city Zarahemla did they cause to be built again. There were many cities which had been sunk, and waters came up in the stead thereof. Therefore these cities could not be renewed, which also means that there's some waters in our country that have cities below them, sunken cities. And it also says they multiplied exceedingly fast. They populated exceedingly fast. So again, these things happen very quickly. Like you can go from not a lot of people to a ton of people and amazing architecture and cities quickly. And just as quick as you can achieve that prosperity, you can collapse into destruction. And it says that they did not walk anymore after the performances and ordinances of the law of Moses, but they did walk after the commandments which they had received from their Lord and their God, continuing in fasting and prayer, and in meeting together oft to pray and to hear the word of the Lord. There was no contention among the people in all the land, but there were mighty miracles wrought among the disciples of Jesus. Sounds like an amazing period of time to be living in. There could not be a happier people among all the people who had been created by the hand of God. They were living correctly. They got all the blessings because of it. They were in one, the children of Christ, and heirs to the kingdom of God. There were no robbers, nor murderers, neither were there Lamanites, nor any manner of ites. They were in one, the children of Christ, and heirs to the kingdom of God. That's Zion. Zion's not a specific physical location. It's this. There's no rich and poor. There's no rob, murder. There's no ites, I'm this, you're that. We're all one. We're all children of Christ, and we're all heirs to the kingdom of God. We're all on the same page. We're all equal. No one's trying to be better or gain or be on top of anybody else. We're all the same. We're all the same in Christ. We're all just trying to live as He wants us to live. Not just trying, like we're actually doing it. That's Zion. And it says that the first generation from Christ had passed away, and there was no contention in all the land. But then the ancient conspiracy reawakens, and because remember, they've got all this, they just built all this amazingness. They've repaired all the cities. They're super prospering, multiplying exceedingly fast. They're living completely as God would have them live. And so now there's a lot of stuff that, and if some people start to get a little greedy and say, well, I don't like this person, I want to have what they have, or I want to be better than this person, that's where the ancient conspiracy now can start to creep in and go, all right, let's you want to do this kill steal thing, because we've seen that work before. And so it says there was still peace in the land, save it were a small part of the people who had revolted from the church and taken upon them the name of the Lamanites. Therefore there began to be Lamanites again in the land. So unfortunately, there's a small group of people who are going, now we want to do things a little differently. And we can guess where this leads, right? But it says the people had multiplied insomuch that they were spread upon all the face of the land, and they became exceedingly rich because of their prosperity in Christ. So this is, again, like I was saying, probably why people were kind of looking like, maybe we can do some still kill type of stuff now. And we can just start to have this all for ourselves. And it says that they also began to wear costly apparel, all manner of fine pearls, and fine things of the world. And from that time forth, they did have their goods and their substances no more common among them. So people are going, nope, don't want to share stuff, don't want to have all things in common. I want my stuff, and I want to have more stuff than what you have. This is just like greed and vanity, like at its core, at its base. It's just like people starting to go, I want some stuff for myself. I want to be better than you. And then when you let that fester, and then that just turns into kill, still, ancient conspiracy, and once you go there, if you don't turn it around, it leads to destruction. It says they began to divide themselves into classes, and this starts to very much describe what we look like nowadays. There were many churches in the land, and in the 231st year, there was a great division among the people. So it's not even 300 years of full peace. Already here by 231 years later, there was a great division among the people. So we see quick to prosper, and we're starting to see the quick to collapse again. It says, when it came to pass that 300 years had passed away, both the people of Nephi and the Lamanites had become exceedingly wicked, one like unto another. So it's not even just these people that broke off and started calling them Lamanites that are wicked, but a little bit more time past that, now like everybody, including the Nephites, they're all participating in wickedness again. So again, the stuff happens quick. It's like quick, mountains cast up quick, not hundreds of billions of years ago. Civilizations prospering super quick, populating all the face of the land and building mighty cities super quick. But then we go from that to now we're turning wicked, and now we're destroyed super quick. It says, and we're going to talk about this in an upcoming video, just introduce them right here, the robbers of Gadianton. Remember, kill, still, ancient conspiracy, and these Gadiantons, these robbers of Gadianton, are fully tapped into the ancient conspiracy, which I'm going to break down. They did spread over all the face of the land, and these robbers of Gadianton are the ancient conspiracy. And so it says, the robbers of Gadianton did spread over all the face of the land. There were none that were righteous, save it were the disciples of Jesus. Gold, silver, they did lay up in store in abundance, and did traffic in all manner of traffic. The whole face of the land had become covered with buildings, and the people were as numerous almost as it were the sands of the sea. Cities were burned with fire, cities were destroyed. And now there's this man Moroni who's watched this decline of this civilization. He goes, I even remain alone to write the sad tale of the destruction of my people. So he, and we'll talk more about this, but he literally watched it, just everybody gets wiped out, like a full destruction of the Nephites. There were Lamanites and the robbers, which remained, like it says right here in Mormon 8:9. There are none save it be the Lamanites and robbers that do exist upon the face of the land. So an entire destruction again of the people that were God's people, because they started living wickedly. But the Lamanites and the robbers didn't get completely wiped out, and the Lamanites that remained, that's the Native Americans that were still living here when the white man, the Gentile, showed up. Okay, so now to cap off this video, this has been a long one, but I think this has been a really good one. Let's talk about the weight. How'd they move the weight? Because this was light work for cowboys. And I say light work for cowboys because the story is, yeah, the cowboys built all this and it was super easy for them, and they were able to pull it off on dirt roads and no machinery, and just all that's a lie. So how did they actually do it? Well, one way is with very large animals. So it says in Ether 9:19 that they had horses, asses, and elephants, and curlums and cumums, all of which were useful unto man, but especially the elephants and the curlums and the cumums were helpful to man. So elephants, very large animals, curlums, cumins, it's still kind of up for debate what exactly those are, but I think that's, again, in the elephant family, probably bigger than the elephants. I think we're talking like mammoth, mastodon type of things. If we look at the ground of the Nebraska Capitol right here, I've showed you this stone woman right here a couple times, but surrounding her is all these different animals kind of swirling all throughout this super intricate marble tile work when they didn't have any stone for roads. So I'll let this play right here, and you can see some of the different animals that are depicted right here. And I think the people who built this building is the Nephites, and they're right here showing us some of the animals that they were using. And some of them are very recognizable to us, but then other ones not so much. Like right here's saber-toothed tiger. And then right here, you know, you've got like a rhino, another type of rhino. And then now we got an elephant and some mastodons and some mammoths. So I think these were very much animals that they were using. And those types of animals can move tremendous amounts of weight. And we do have remains of mammoths and mastodons across this country. This is, you know, New York, a NewYork.gov thing right here talking about mastodons in New York. Laguna Hills, this is in California, where mammoths and saber-toothed cats were found. So there is evidence of all this stuff. And here's just a couple quick videos of some elephants. And it's really, really easy for them to move really heavy objects. So yeah, I think elephants, mammoths, mastodons is definitely one of the ways that they moved some tremendous amounts of weight, because these animals, they can actually do it. And they're very smart and can be trained very, very well if you want to do that with them. So here's an elephant knocking down a tree. In a previous video, I showed you some men using tractors to knock down some trees. And those were actually like burnt, hollowed out trees already, and they were still having to use tractors to get them down. But this is like a live tree, which is like, I mean, it's fall or winter time, so it doesn't have all its leaves on it, but it's still alive. And you can see this elephant has no problem bringing it down. It's like fun and playful for this elephant to be able to do something like this. Here's a look at another one. This elephant completely uproots this tree. And look, he's just like having fun doing it. It's not difficult for him. So man, if you've got herds of elephants and mammoths and mastodons, you can do some serious heavy lifting with them. And Ether 918 says they had all manner of cattle, oxen, cows, sheep, swine, goats, and also many other kinds of animals. So we see depicted right here in Omaha, Nebraska, we have some large animals moving some large carts with some men overseeing them. So I think that's, again, definitely they were used in construction. Right here we've got, you know, that huge bowl right there. This is on the Vermont Capitol building. We see some husbandry, some farming tools right here, and oxen depicted in the background. I mentioned this before previously. They also had machinery right here, Jerem 1:8. They became exceedingly rich in gold, silver, precious things, fine workmanship of wood, buildings, and in machinery. Also iron, copper, brass, steel, manner of tools of every kind to till the ground, and weapons of war. Like, they had it all. And we go to the Old Testament. Isaiah is talking about new sharp threshing instrument having teeth. Well, a sharp threshing instrument is something like this. These types of tractors that we use for farming. This is our machinery for tilling the earth. And then to talk a little bit more about shipping, we can go to the Old Testament and go 1 Kings 9:26. King Solomon made a navy of ships. It's definitely how Solomon was moving around. Some of the weight was super heavy weight on ships on water. And then also right here, Ezekiel 28:5, it says, by thy great wisdom and by thy traffic hast thou increased thy riches. So people getting rich through trafficking, through shipping. And Ephraim, actually, it talks about him getting rich from shipping oil. Says, Ephraim feedeth on wind and followeth after the east wind. He daily increaseth lies and desolation, and they do make a covenant with the Assyrians, and oil is carried into Egypt. And Ephraim said, yet I am become rich. I have found me out substance in all my labors. And if we're talking about shipping around oil, well, here's the type of stuff that we have to use to pull oil out of the earth and then ship it around. I mean, it's just incredible machinery, a whole lot of it, and all the machines to build the machines, all the supply chain. And then we also learn in the Old Testament, 2 Kings 20:20, he made a pool and a conduit and brought water into the city. So these are huge water projects where you're building rivers basically, and you just don't do that if you're poor dirt rag people. You got to have some real machinery to do that. Talks again about stop the upper water course. So that's like building a dam, like a huge dam. Again, that's another huge masonry project. And ships can haul significantly more weight than trains and trucks. If we look at this chart right here, this is just a ship on the Great Lakes, and it's saying its carrying capacity is 70,000 tons, and then it gives you the comparison here. You need 700 train cars to match that and 2,800 semi-trucks to match that. How many wood carts and horses do you need to match that? I don't think you can. I think they were shipping using very large boats. They also had trains. They probably had trucks, and they were also using super large animals to help them as well. This is a look at one of the boats right now that runs on Lake Superior. All right, and then we have the Erie Canal, which I talked about a little bit, but this Erie Canal can really connect you to a lot of different places, and is still in use as a way for shipping around materials. These are some of the boats that run on the Erie Canal. This is an old picture, and not seeing stone get moved here by these 1800s people. See some boats on water, but they're just moving a little bit of lumber around. Here's a look at the Erie Canal. It's an amazing canal. It really does just weave all through these ancient stone cities. Great way to move some super heavy material around. Here's another look at it. Again, just this Erie Canal weaving through these stone cities right here. Here's another look at a building in Hartford, Connecticut. Really, really amazing stone masonry building right here with ships depicted on it, marble pillars, the works. Hartford, Connecticut Capitol building. See some ships depicted right there. In this Nebraska Capitol, tile work right here with God, the rod, the eagle, the pillar. Down here we see some ships on some canals traveling through stone cities, and you can see this exact type of architecture still sitting in some of our cities with canals running through them. Oftentimes the canals are empty and decommissioned, but there are still a few that do run. And then also trains, like I mentioned, is another great way to move weight. As you can see right here, it's not as good as a large ship on water, but you can still move a lot on trains, and trains can actually be very nimble. And even like this guy right here, he's just got this really, really small steam powered train, but even this really small train is capable of moving a lot of weight. Like look at this right here. It's pretty cool, but I mean, trains are a very, very efficient way to do things, to transport materials, but also to just transport people around. So, and there's different types of train. There's different types of tracks and stuff like that, which I'll show you right here. But this picture is really cool because you can see, and if you've ever gone for a long drive across the country, you'll probably see this a time or two, but just really, really, really long trains, and they can be very nimble, which is very cool. I mean, it's a really amazing piece of transportation. And then you have things like this where you can manually power a train track. You know, if you can power someone up to the point, and then they can take off, and you can just continue coasting and coasting and coasting. So I would say we don't think about roller coasters as like an actual way of transporting and stuff like that, but it actually could be a very efficient way to do things. And if you've got big animals, you could just throw a mammoth on there for an hour and then bring another mammoth in, and you've got a really, really quick and easy way to, you know, bring people up to the high places of the coaster where then they can drop and just coast to wherever they need to go. Here's another look at a roller coaster just cruising through pyramids. And so I would say like this is a very much a form of transportation that existed alongside these pyramids and these mountains. Here's a look at this type of technology, machinery, transportation in Capitola, California. It's got this track, this little cart that sits on this track, and it can haul you up and down and move a lot of material up and down. Here's another look at it. Very, very cool. And I'm going to show you some more of these. I think these are pretty awesome, and were definitely one of the ways they moved up and down through their really, really tall cities and transported materials, that sort of a thing. It's like right here, we look at this one in France. I think these are called like funiculars or something like that. But this is one in France. Really, really awesome. This is another look at it right here. So it's got this huge, ancient, beautiful stone type thing, the architecture down here at the bottom, taking you up the hill. And of course, it was built really quickly in 2 years and then demolished in 1974. Just, you know, getting rid of the old good stuff. Yeah, so it's a funicular is what it's called. And then they can also function off of water counterweight. So, and you can see these wheels up here. We've seen these wheels a lot of times in this ancient architecture. It's definitely, you can use water to basically move it up and down. Really cool. And then here's a look at another one in Budapest Castle Hill funicular is what this is called. So it's telling us right here, it's got castle, it's got hill, and a funicular connected to it. So this is a type of transportation that's connected to castles and hills. So this is a type of transportation, all their castles, their hills, their pyramids, towers, palaces. This is very much a type of transportation they used to use. This one right here, if I didn't tell you otherwise, I could just go, yeah, this is France still. But no, this is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh is a great example of an ancient stone city from the Nephites still sitting in this country. Another place you can see a lot of this transportation is in theme parks, which are, if you pay attention, actually old world themed.
Are these the best theme park views in?
So this one right here is really cool. You've got like a water canal that people are traveling on. And then here's a coaster that people are traveling on through stone cities. And then also, you know, Disneyland, that theme park, castle, old world theme inside of there. Also, you know, this pyramid mountain right here. And then it also has the monorail tracks in there. Again, it's just all old world themed. It should be how our cities actually are, but no, we're just told this is theme park stuff. This is like, come have some fun for a second. It's like, well, why don't we actually build this all out in our cities? Well, our cities used to have all this as part of them, and it's been getting decommissioned and demolished by the ancient conspiracy, like this monorail right here in Los Angeles. Ferris wheel is another interesting one to think about. I'm not going to get into that right now, but there's probably a lot more to be said about Ferris wheels. You can see right here, you got boats on water, you've got roller coasters over here, you've got tower. It's just, again, all old world themed theme parks. Coney Island, New York, Dreamland. Like, oh yeah, this is a dream. No, this is ancient. This is how these cities used to be. We used to have this type of stuff. Old stone bridges, canal waterways, funiculars that bring you up and down. Here's in Bogota, Colombia. Again, we're seeing just roller coasters depicted, Ferris wheels depicted, but this is them in mockery showing us stuff that we should be using and that used to be part of these cities for more efficient transportation and moving weight, but just decommission and demolish it. This is in Helsinki, Finland, and you see like these old stone ancient people holding up a train, a roller coaster, a monorail. And this one's in the Netherlands, and same thing, we're seeing castles with roller coasters shooting out of them because old world theme. This is how cities used to be. This is in Rome, Italy. Also, just throwing this in there for fun, we can see that there's this castle, but the pyramid's connected to a castle. So pyramids and castles aren't this separate thing, and roller coasters and trains aren't this separate thing. This is all one thing. These super stone cities with pyramids and walls surrounding them and protecting them, and roller coasters and trains and shipping canals full of water, that's all one thing. That's all one civilization prospering and using a bunch of different ways to build and transport. Here's another look at that picture right there from Rome, Italy, looking a little nicer. And then now here's another look at it, and then now how it looks today is like, all right, well, here's this ancient pyramid and the ancient castle, and now here's all our new stuff that we just build around it. For whatever reason, they didn't want to fully demolish this, but just interesting to see. Vermont Capitol, you can see a train right here depicted, and these little cogwheels also. Inside of the Iowa Capitol Triangle right here, over here on this side, there's a train depicted right there, the stone woman inside of there. And then right here, this is Santa Barbara, also the stone woman's right above him. But this Egyptian looking man down here, you can see some trains running. And then right here, he's holding a ship. And right behind him are big stone buildings. And then also chariots, that's mentioned several times in the scriptures. And this is just another one where I think, I don't know, are chariots, again, like how they're depicted to us and how we're told, are they dumbed down and we're not really seeing them for what they actually are? I think probably Old Testament talks about having chariot cities, and it specifically talks about chariot wheels and brazen wheels, which is like melted metal, wheels made out of metal. And they're talking about their metals being gold, silver, copper, brass, iron. And then also right here in 1 Kings 7:33 talks more about the specifics of the wheels and their axle trees, their naves, their felloes, their spokes, and they were all molten. Like very, very nice wheels we're talking about right here. Very advanced designs of wheels. So wheels were not foreign to them. They were using them all the time, all over the place. Beautiful wheels made out of really nice materials. Again, we see this type of wheel depicted, Colorado Capitol next to the stone woman inside the triangle. Here's a look at a wheel on a chair in Goodland, Kansas. Over up here you can see that Egyptian eagle. Right here you got a couple wheels in this one. This guy like a stone, like a mill, like a flour mill, grinder type of thing. And then this wheel looking very much like a modern wheel. And then right here we've got California Capitol, this guy holding a wheel. This guy on the Capitol grounds also holding a wheel. And then this is inside the Los Angeles City Hall. There's a wheel depicted. There's a wheel behind this, I think this is like the thing that goes on top of oxen or whatever, but anyways, you see a wheel depicted behind it, Vermont Capitol. Also another wheel here connected to like an anchor and chains. And then you got this wheel right here. And then all those wheels look a lot like these ore crusher wheels. This is a modern day ore crusher, and we just learned that they were mining ore and turning it into usable materials. So here we go again with other types of wheels that they were using for all their materials. And then also aircraft. This is one where people really have a hard time considering it, but were wings, was flight foreign to them? I don't think so. And I think we can again see some evidences of maybe aircraft was definitely part of their transportation as well. So Nebraska Capitol, remember Egyptian eagle, eagle's wings, flight wasn't foreign to them. We've got Sphinx down here, a lion with wings. And Exodus 37:9 says cherubim spread out their wings on high. So wings, flight. Isaiah 18:11, the land shadowing with wings. What does that mean? A land shadowing with wings. Isaiah 40:31, wings as eagles. So wings and flight was not a foreign concept to them. And now if we look at the Book of Mormon, I think we could say that maybe they're actually talking about flight right here. Helaman 1:10 says, so speedy was the flight of Kishkumen that no man could overtake him. Now what we picture in our heads is poor dirt rag people running in dirt, and he just wasn't running away fast enough, so someone caught up to him. Or in this case, he was running so fast that no one could catch up to him. Or is it saying, so speedy was the flight, he took a flight, he was flying in the sky, in the air, and he was doing it so fast that he couldn't be overtaken. Here's an even better one. Mormon 5:7, it says, we did again take to flight. Don't we take flights? When we take flights, is that us running as fast as we can on dirt to get away? Or are we flying? Are we taking a flight? It says, we did again take flight. And those whose flight was swifter than the Lamanites did escape. And those whose flight did not exceed the Lamanites were swept down and destroyed. This, if you look at it that way, very much matches air travel, aircraft, flying in the sky. We took a flight, and if those whose flight was swifter, who could fly away faster, they got away. But the slower ones, those whose flight did not exceed the Lamanites, were swept down from the sky to the earth and destroyed. That sounds a lot like air travel. It sounds a lot like flight. It sounds less like people running in dirt, and it sounds like they were taking flights, and whoever could fly away faster, they got away. And if they couldn't fly away fast enough, then the other people in their flight crafts caught up and swept them down to the ground. Montpelier, Vermont right here. We can see, I showed you this one, it's got the train, but then it also has these wheels, these cogs connecting it, and on the other side is some sort of airplane, some sort of air travel right there. So that's where I'll wrap up this video. I think, once again, all our inventions that we say were invented in the past couple hundred years and they never existed prior. No one ever had airplanes or trains or none of that. Like, I think that's all just made up, deceptive lies from the ancient conspiracy, from Lucifer, the devil, and all of his followers. I think they're just lying to us. And when you come into the scriptures and see the people for what they are, which is rich, advanced, prosperous people, masterful architects and masterful designers, and how they move all that weight around, and they were shipping and trafficking, I think it's telling us all of it. But there's another story that we're told in schools and stuff like that, and I think one's true and one's a lie. I think what is in the book of law and the scriptures is true, and I think it shows us that these are advanced, prosperous civilizations that had all the means necessary for transporting all the weight and all the people through all their cities and kingdoms and palaces and temples and pyramids. So that's where we'll wrap up this video. In the next one, I'll give you the full breakdown of the ancient conspiracy.